morning, everybody. It's 7 o'clock. On today's programme, tens of thousands of homes without water. And we'll find out in just a moment how much bills are going up.
Plus, Labour MPs line up to criticise Keir Starmer over his pensions U-turn, with the SNP preparing to force a vote on the issue.
And we'll keep you dreaming of a white Christmas, I'm afraid. Forecasters say it's going to be mild.
Oh, there we go. We've all gone festive for you today on our last show before Christmas, Thursday, the 19th of December. The regulator is revealing how much water companies can raise bills right now. Southern Water says that almost 60,000 homes on the south coast could be without water until the weekend.
Here in Avignon, verdicts are due for 51 men in the mass rape trial that shocked France.
Sky News investigation reveals that police attend less than a quarter of shoplifting incidents. And stepping into Christmas with Cara Delevingne, Elton John says he's never looked so good. Paul's here. What are those water companies doing?
So we've got the result of Ofwat's annual 5-yearly price review for all the water companies in Britain. The water companies say we want to spend this much money. Ofwat told them how much they can increase bills. It's a whopping 36% on average across the 11 water and wastewater providing companies. So that's an average figure of what bills are going to be going up. Remember, the trend over the last decade has been bills have been held low. The water companies have said, and the regulator has said, they want to spend more money. Ofwat's going to let them spend £104 billion over the next 5 years. That's double what was spent in the previous 5 years. Much of that the water companies say they will spend on meeting public concerns about sewage outflows, improving leakage. We've got a growing population, climate change and the rest of it. As a consequence, they need to increase the amount they charge. 36% is the average. Put that in context. In the summer, the first stage of this process, Ofwat said they could raise bills by 22%. The companies came back and said, we want to raise them by 40%. They've got almost everything they asked for here, the water companies, 36%, but I think that will...
You said different ones are getting different amounts.
There are different amounts, and I'm just getting this right now, so let's have a little look and see the percentage increase. Let's have a look. Thames Water, the biggest water company in Britain and the most troubled, was in court this week trying to get a bailout loan to survive. I can see 35% Thames Water customers will go up. Southern Water, which also has major financial troubles, I'm going to talk about some very specific troubles for them this morning. They asked for an 83% increase in bills. They've got 53%, so you're going to be paying... your bill is going to be going up. Let's have a look. The average bill for Southern here is going to go up from £420 to £768.
What about those people who haven't got any water this morning?
Well, there are 60,000 people around Southampton served by Southern Water who don't have any problem. There's a problem in a pumping station. It has knocked out those homes. There's schools closed. The hospital, one of the hospitals down there, it's around Southampton, that area, one of the hospitals doesn't have water. It's said that it is, quotes, business as usual. They've set up stations, as I understand it, to distribute bottled water to people, but the company's saying water might not be back on till the weekend. So, given the backdrop here, we're talking about a company that has got huge financial troubles of its own, perhaps doesn't get as much attention because Thames Water is such a basket case. It performs poorly on most of its consumer targets. It now can't even keep the taps running on the day it wants to put up bills by more than 50%. So this is a really big moment for... It's a tough day for Southern, but it's a really big moment for the water industry because clearly for consumers, water bills, actually, you think the last 3 years we've talked about the cost of living so many times. We didn't really mention water because it wasn't going up. Now water is going to be a bill that people are going to have to... Many more people are going to have to worry about.
Do they say they have to invest in infrastructure, or is a lot of it going to go to the shareholders?
Well, there will still be a return to shareholders. The premise for this is that companies want to say they will double the amount they spend, and a lot of that, they say, will be spent on investment and improvement, but we have heard that before. The number I haven't been able to get to yet is I'm expecting in here there's... Ofwat also set the amount that investors can expect as a return on equity, so money they put in, or debt, and that number I am expecting to go up. So not only will we all be paying more as bill payers, but investors will be getting more for putting money into the water industry, and I can imagine consumers and customers will have some lively views about that. Can we put it that way?
Yeah, Merry Christmas, everybody. Thanks very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Kay.
you. Now to the trial that's shocked France. A panel of 5 judges will sentence Dominique Pelicot this morning. Verdicts will also be delivered on 50 other men charged with raping or sexually assaulting his former wife, Gisele. Joined now by our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins. Hello, Siobhan. Today is the day when she gets justice.
Morning, Kay. Well, you can see behind me already that there's a queue of press waiting to get into the court here to hear these verdicts, which we're expecting to start being handed down, as well as sentences in around the next 2 hours or so. As you say, receiving those verdicts and sentences today, the main person that we'll be focusing on to start with is, of course, Dominique Pelicot. He is the husband of Gisele Pelicot, and he has admitted to drugging and raping her repeatedly over the period of around a decade. And he also said that he invited strangers to their home to allegedly rape her as well. Now, the details of this case have been extremely distressing, and it's gripped the world because Gisele Pelicot made the brave decision to waive her right to anonymity, and that meant that some of the videos of the attacks were shown in open court, but also the evidence could be discussed as well. And as you said, there are 50 other men who will be awaiting verdicts and sentencing today. They are accused of rape and sex assault. Now, around 2/3 of them deny the charges, and they claim, some of them, that they believe they were being invited to the house, that this was part of the couple's sexual fantasy. They say they didn't think it was rape, but many people have been absolutely outraged by what has happened and wonder how this has happened. And I think one of the facts in this case, which is distressing people even more, is the fact that, as well as those who are on trial at the moment, police found images of around 30 other men who they haven't yet been able to identify, and those people are still free, likely in the local area.
OK, for now, thank you. Sir Keir Starmer facing growing backlash from his own MPs over the government's refusal to compensate women who lost out because of changes to the pension age. Just slipped this in, didn't they, just before Christmas?
Yeah.
But colleagues having none of it.
No, and it's not surprising that Labour is in a bit of hot water on this, because the difficulty is the amount of pictures and, kind of records of Labour cabinet ministers while in opposition. There's one of them, for instance, supporting WASPy women, saying that they would get justice for the WASPy women. And so the feeling amongst campaigners and the WASPy women is there's a massive betrayal here. And they feel that there's been a bit of a dishonesty there in terms of how much, they've got Rachel Reeves there talking about how they want to get justice for the WASPy women. Her own mother, Rachel Reeves' own mother, is actually a WASPy woman, and she campaigned in 2016 and said that there'd been a great injustice to these women, now essentially completely U-turning on that position, and also quite uncomfortable because it's not just the opposition criticising the Labour Party, saying that they're being hypocritical, but also Labour, it's a lot of red on red at the moment. So the Labour leader Anna Sarwar, for instance, has said it's the wrong decision. That's already quite painful when you've got some of your most senior politicians, successful politicians, saying you've got it wrong. Those like Diane Abbott, for instance, are saying this is outrageous. Now, again, Diane Abbott is someone that you might expect her to criticise Keir Starmer. She's not from his camp. She's not from his wing of the party. She can be quite critical of him. But nonetheless, she's a senior Labour figure. She's a WASPy woman herself also, and she is saying she understands the questions around the public finances, around the fact that there's not a lot of cash at the moment, but nonetheless she still feels that Starmer's not showing he understands what they've been through and what they have essentially been campaigning on. And also what's really interesting is the Ombudsman Chief Exec herself has actually criticised the government, really. She's gone on to say that actually it's not really fair for the government to acknowledge that they got it wrong but then refuse to make it right. So you've got criticism coming from all angles, really, on this. Some would say, actually, we were never going to be able to have this kind of money, but then the argument would have been whether you should have been more honest with women at the beginning rather than saying one thing and then completely U-turning in government, because the problem is that people are worried that that's going to damage trust in politics in general, but also...
Do you think?
Exactly. But also that Starmer, the continuous criticism of Starmer is also, you know, saying one thing, doing another. And this doesn't help because it's just yet another example of that.
OK, for now, thank you. Thanks very much indeed. Just after 8 o'clock this morning, joined by the Minister for Energy Consumers, that's Miatta Fahnbulleh. We'll put a lot of that to her when she joins us just after 8. Before that, though, look who's here.
Morning, Kay.
Good morning. What have you got?
We're going to talk about this once-a-day breast cancer pill that the NHS will be rolling out to patients in England in those late stages of breast cancer, which could be game-changing. So that's kind of leading out top story there in the bulletin. So it's in England. 1,100 patients could benefit from it. And it's being rolled out on the NHS, which has been welcomed by cancer charities. The charity Breast Cancer UK in particular has now welcomed the news and says it basically remains concerned the system, despite this breakthrough, isn't working in getting all drugs to the people who need them. So that's welcome research today. Elsewhere, Cancer Research UK, they've sounded the alarm over a dip in the number of people taking up the offer of cancer screenings. New figures from the charity show that breast, bowel and cervical cancer screening programmes spotted almost 90,000 cancers in just 5 years. People go and get screened if you're offered it. Elsewhere, the number of deaths caused solely by alcohol consumption has risen 42% since 2019. It's prompted the Alcohol Health Alliance to call for urgent action to address what they described as an alarming trend. Economists predict that the Bank of England will keep interest rates at 4.75% when the committee meet later today. Yesterday, inflation rose above the central bank's target to an 8-month high of 2.6% for November. And the struggling Belfast shipyard, Harland and Wolff, could be saved from sinking by Spanish shipbuilder Navantia. Now, the government-backed agreement, valued at around £70 million, will safeguard all 1,200 jobs.
A Sky News investigation reveals that police attend less than a quarter of shoplifting incidents. The lack of response has led some shop owners feeling the need to arm themselves for protection. Our political correspondent Rob Powell reports.
Christmas Day last year at a South London corner shop. Stuck behind the counter, the cashier tries to fight off 3 thieves. A woman pulls out scratch cards as a man holding a bottle starts grabbing spirits. At a different London store, Dennis says he's targeted by thieves daily.
I used to have a baseball bat and a pepper spray, but the police said there's a weapon. I can't keep anything behind the counter.
And when you kind of call the police to report it, what tends to happen after?
They don't take seriously under certain amount. They think that's the serious case, and they don't come.
Data obtained by Sky News backs up these concerns. In 2023, fewer than 1 in 4 shoplifting incidents were attended to immediately by police, based on responses from more than half of England's 39 police forces. In 2016, data from 16 forces shows an attendance rate of 52%, while in 2013, figures from 11 forces show a rate of 72%, a clear downward trend.
Comparing crime data is hard because forces record it differently or don't have it in an accessible format. Some insist falling attendance rates are down to modern, more remote investigation techniques, while other forces say that officers will still attend a crime scene, maybe days after a report's been made, but only if there are credible lines of inquiry.
This has become much more organised.
We showed our findings to the policing minister, who blamed declining officer numbers, but also said forces should do more.
Of course it concerns me, because every shop theft is a criminal offence. And I know that the police in October 23, they set up a plan for how to deal with shop theft, to say that they would attend if there was violence, if there was someone detained, or if there was a need to secure evidence. But obviously I want them to do far more than that.
Norfolk Police has the highest prosecution rate for shoplifting in the country, something the force puts down to a back-to-basics approach.
Bobby's on the beat, that face of people around, again, not only to deter, but also make people feel safer.
Are you able to focus more on this because you maybe don't have demand in other parts of policing?
I think it's more an efficiency thing, focusing our resources and making sure, as I say, the work is done beforehand so that we can deal with it as efficiently and effectively as possible.
That also involves working with a CCTV unit, a vision of neighbourhood policing the government hopes to emulate with what control it does have. Rob Powell, Sky News.
2.9 million children in Ukraine in need of urgent humanitarian assistance. And now they face a third Christmas under the dark cloud of war. Ali Griffin from Save the Children is joining us. Hi, Ali. Talk to us about how these kids are coping.
Yeah, that's right. So that's about 40% of the population living in Ukraine right now need humanitarian assistance. Last night it was 0 degrees in Kyiv. During this winter, it's expected to reach at least -20. And with the continued bombing of power stations, we've spoken to families who believe that they could freeze to death in their house if it's bombed and nobody can reach them. It's a devastating fear, a devastating prospect for them. Some families could also face up to 20 hours a day without electricity in the coming winter, and that energy deficiency may impair the water, the heating supplies, which may lead to further displacement, increased needs. Save the Children is there on the ground. We're distributing food, we're distributing warm blankets, we're doing cash transfers so people can spend money how they need to and keep the markets going. But it's a worrying time for families.
How difficult is it to get aid to them?
Well, we're on the ground and we're working with partners across the country, but this year there's been a significant increase in the airstrikes across Ukraine. It's actually led to a 40% spike in child casualties. In fact, between January and September this year, more children in those months were killed in more than the whole of 2023. And that's in part because of these huge, wide area effect explosive weapons that are being used in populated areas in cities like Kharkiv and Zaporizhia. And when children are experiencing the impact of these weapons, they're 7 times more likely to die rather than adults, and their bodies are likely to be blown through the air by blast. They might cause concussion. And if they are able to survive, they're looking at facing a lifetime without one or both legs. These are the kinds of things that children are facing on a daily basis. Obviously, the mental health impact of that is phenomenal. We analysed our case management data from the first 6 months of this year. 43% of the children we spoke to are suffering psychosocial distress. That means symptoms of anxiety, fear, difficulty concentrating. We actually saw speech defects, twitching, sleep disorders, and seeing children as young as 8 years old developing grey hair because of the stress that they're going through. I guess imagine it's freezing cold, air raid alerts are going off multiple times a day. Children have to go with their families, forced to rush into cold, damp basements, cellars, sometimes subway stations. And there's little or no conveniences like water, electricity, heating. And that might happen day after day, and they're relying solely on distribution of water and food and basic items. And we did some analysis that the average child spent 900 hours underground in the first year of this war. That was in 2022. It's now nearly 2025. I can't imagine how children are going to cope with this continued bombardment and what the devastation of those childhoods looks like for a whole country.
And what can people do if they want to help?
Well, the people of Britain have been incredibly generous. The support for the Disasters Emergency Committee campaign has been wonderful. Some of the work that we've been able to do with that money that's been raised is obviously help children on the ground deliver humanitarian aid, but we're also doing research with places like Imperial College to look into how to grow knee joints that grow with a child, so prosthetics can be easier in the future. It's been incredibly supportive, but of course you can keep talking to the government. The UK government's been incredibly generous and it's committed to sustaining that long-term support for Ukraine, and it needs to do so in terms of humanitarian support, but also the energy and recovery and reconstruction that we're seeing. We would also call for the government to release the money from the sale of Chelsea Football Club. That's over £2 billion, and it's currently stuck in a bank account, and it's to be used to help support victims of Ukraine. That could be a huge humanitarian fund that could be released this winter in order to support these families we've just been talking about. And of course, helping support Ukrainian refugees and thinking about those children who are currently in Russia, who need to be reunited with their families. There are diplomatic efforts the UK can keep doing. So in terms of support, people watching the news, please keep writing to your MP, please keep supporting this work. Every war is a war that's waged on children, and they are the innocent victims of this. Yeah.
Ali, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for speaking so eloquently about this topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin will host his end-of-year address in Moscow this morning. The Russian president is expected to take questions from journalists during the annual event, which is expected to last up to 4 hours. I know. We'll bring you all the updates from that event throughout the day here on Sky News. Disappointing news for those hoping for a white Christmas next week. Snow isn't forecast. Let's get more, should we, from Met Office meteorologist Claire Nazir. Hi, Claire. Tell us more. Morning.
Morning, yes. Well, leading up to Christmas, it's pretty lively with the weather. We could see a little bit of snow over the Highlands and the Pennines, but certainly wet and windy. On Christmas Day itself, good news. If you want to step out for a Christmas walk, it looks like it's going to settle down, but the temperatures are likely to be on the mild side. In fact, since 1960, we've only had 4 proper white Christmases, although the definition is 1 flake of snow falling on the British Isles, on the UK. But that would be disappointing if that was actually going to happen, because not a lot of people would see it. So bad news when it comes to if you want that picture white postcard type of Christmas day, but good news if you just don't want that cold air and a little bit of sunshine coming through.
And we did have snow earlier on in the year, of course, in last month to be precise. Are we potentially looking at that again? Not for Christmas,
well, it does happen
going forward?
Yes, it does happen over Christmas, over the winter months. All it takes is temperatures dipping close to freezing and then a weather front coming in and the rain turns to snow, and that's what happened. So, yes, we still will get snow through our winter months. However, to pinpoint one specific day when most of our winter is more likely to be wet and windy means that Christmas Day loses out most years.
OK, for now, thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. Could the Pelicot trial be a turning point for France? We'll ask a barrister. And we'll talk to the water regulator, Ofwat, about how much bills have gone up and why.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion that's just come down. I think it was a monster just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks and taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
There's been an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change. We're being crushed.
Free from wherever you get your news. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine. The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world. Sky News, the full story first.
Well, hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous.
Many people have died riding it.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up, we'll speak to the Children's Laureate. Oh, yes, we will. But before that, have you seen Carla Delevingne? Is that how I pronounce her surname? Yeah. Being Elton John.
So I had a quick little look, and I think she's done a really good job.
Yeah. Should we share it?
Yeah.
Let's have a look.
This is a fantastic song. And if we think about spirit, about fun, then yeah, brilliant. Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
And he says he's very pleased. He said on TikTok that she's made him look fantastic. So, yeah, and I love this song. I love anything Elton does.
Yeah.
Did you see his gig at Glastonbury?
No.
Did you not? He was the headliner a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, it was sensitive. I thought, I'll watch 5 minutes and then I'll have to go to bed because it was a Sunday night.
Okay.
Get those hours in.
Day.
Absolutely.
And 2 hours later, I was still, like, enraptured.
Yeah.
I don't get spending 4 days in the mud to watch him and you be at the back when there's, like, 50 people in front of you. But sitting on my sofa...
Perfect.
Yes.
Nice little gin and tonic or something, you know, softer potentially on a school night. Oh, yeah, totally. Thing is, so Cara Delevingne, I mean, she looks obviously still like her. You can still say it's her, right? But it's so good, like, she does kind of encapsulate the vibe, doesn't she?
That's
I think she's done a good job with it. He's such an icon.
The other thing we're going to be talking about, sorry to interrupt, is which Christmas songs are rubbish.
Okay.
And you weren't here the other day, you know, when I said it was, and I said, no, that one, we're not playing that one.
Yeah.
What one was it?
Oh, well, I don't know. Do you think you can guess?
Mariah Carey?
Yes, it was Mariah Carey. It was absolutely Mariah Carey.
I like Mariah Carey.
Yeah, well, here you go then.
For you, Mari. Although I like the old video.
Oh, this is the new one, isn't it?
Yeah, I like the old video.
Oh, she's done another one.
Well, this is the new, like, revamped video. But it's the old one is that when, you know, when she's young and she's like, it's the OG video, you know? It's all like 80s or, I don't know, 90s.
We had the director of the Wham...
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we
last
had
Christmas.
the director of that one on the programme a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, he was great, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he found this place where they were going to film in Austria, I think it was, wasn't it? And he said the biggest challenge was to keep them sober.
What can you say? Show business, rock and roll.
It's so timeless too. Timeless. That's why I love Wham.
So we're talking about that. And also, we're going to be talking to Claire Irvin as well.
Yes.
Lovely Claire.
I love when Claire comes in
Yeah.
because it's all about somewhere sunshiny to go, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's she got for us?
She's going to tell us where people are going.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Where do you think's hottest? Not hottest as in temperature-wise. The hottest places to go.
Lapland?
That's a good question. That's a good guess. Finnish Lapland is on the list.
Okay, here we go.
Like Australia, South Africa, anywhere like that has real actual blue
Australia's
skies.
not on the list.
Caribbean?
The Caribbean is on the list. Apparently skiing is very popular as well. I once went skiing, fell over, broke a credit card, never went again.
Broke a credit card because you spent too much or because...
No, because I fell over and it was cold. It's like, this is not for me. Have you got some top stories?
Yes, I do.
Thank
Top
you.
stories for you, everyone at home. Almost 60,000 people across parts of Hampshire. Well, they're waking up this morning with no water. Southern Water have apologised for, they call it a technical issue. Elsewhere, the ex-husband of Gisele Pelicot, described as one of France's worst sex offenders. He will be sentenced today. We'll be across this story for you as it happens. 50 other men are accused of raping or sexually assaulting Miss Pelicot, and we will hear the verdicts in their cases as they happen. Well, a bit closer to home, Sir Keir Starmer is facing growing backlash, this time from his own MPs, over the government's refusal to compensate women who lost out because of changes to the pension age. And exclusive Sky News data reveals there's been a dramatic drop in the number of shoplifting incidents attended by police forces across the UK, sparking anger from shop owners.
Going to be talking about, in more detail, just chatting about Dominique Pelicot. He is going to discover his fate today, one of France's worst sex offenders, if not the worst sex offender. These are live images from the court. We're expecting the sentencing to start being handed down in around about an hour's time. Lots of journalists queuing up to try to get into the court to be able to report this story, not just to the good people of France, but to people all around the world. One man, her husband, having pleaded guilty. 50 other men will hear their fate today. They've pleaded not guilty. Some of the list of people that were allegedly involved included a nurse, a prison guard, a journalist, a soldier, a baker. It's beggars belief, really, doesn't it? Let's bring in Dr. Charlotte Proudman, barrister at Goldsmith Chambers. A couple of things. Good morning.
Good morning.
A couple of things to talk to you about today, but let's start with Pelicot, currently awaiting 50 verdicts in that case. Such a brave woman.
Yes.
She decided to waive her anonymity.
Yes, and I think that just speaks volumes for many survivors. You know, she said herself that she shouldn't feel the shame, no victim should feel shame, the perpetrators should feel shame. And I think shining a very bright light on the trauma that she suffered with videos played out in court in terms of the rape she said that she'd suffered, along with being drugged, I think is just incredible. She is a remarkable woman and she will go down in history, and she's turned something that's so harrowing against her into, I think, something so much bigger for survivors.
Yeah. You criticised the way that she was treated in court.
Yes, I mean, she spoke herself about the way that she was put on trial, even though, of course, her husband accepted that he had drugged and raped her. And she said that the types of language and questioning that was used around rape stereotypes and how a victim should behave or acted, whether in fact she was drugged or intoxicated, that type of language, I think, really sends out a strong message the way women are treated in criminal and family courts.
Going through the list of those that have, will hear their fate a little bit later on, probably within an hour or so, how did all these people know each other?
Well, quite. I mean, apparently they were all using a website, and this website was designed, or at least aspects of it, to communicate with other men about potentially drugging and raping women. And I think what's so shocking and harrowing about this is that it was a very small town as well that this was going on, so people were living in very short distances of each other. And like you say, men from all walks of life. And one of the things I hope this dispels is that we tend to think that rapists are monsters, and of course their actions are, but rapists live amongst us. You know, 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted or raped potentially in their lifetime. That's how severe this can be.
That is a startling number, isn't it?
It is, and the vast majority of women...
They still sat with me and listening to what you're saying.
The vast majority of women never report, and I think this, I hope, breaks the taboo that rape is an outlier and something that doesn't happen to, and of course it does, and we know how prevalent it is.
Something else we want to talk to you about this morning, Charlotte, is you being cleared of misconduct for criticising a judge ruling in a domestic abuse case. Can you tell us what happened?
Yes, so I was accused by my regulatory body. I'm a barrister, women's rights barrister, and I was accused by the barrister regulatory body for misconduct, 5 charges of misconduct, because I criticised a domestic abuse ruling. I said it minimised domestic abuse, it victim blamed, pathologised her. But I also said that it had echoes of the boys' club, meaning boys' club attitudes towards domestic abuse. And the judge in the case was a member of the then all-male Garrick Club. Of course, now, and I was one of those that was instrumental in encouraging the doors opening up.
Yeah, you came on
to
this
women,
programme to talk about
and
it.
we spoke about that. And at the same time, this disciplinary case for more than 2.5 years was rolling on behind the scenes. And it has been, I have to say, a very difficult time for me with that going on. And I'm delighted to say I've been cleared of misconduct. And the judge, in fact, even said that the judiciary of England and Wales is robust enough to withstand criticism. I think what I found particularly shocking was that the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Violence Against Women and Girls, along with 3 others, wrote to the British government expressing their concern about the treatment of me, not only in this misconduct case, but also that male barristers had been verbally abusive towards me, calling me the C word. I won't say that on air, of course. I know I'll be thrown off. Yes, calling me the C word, wanker, other types of abusive
think we can say that one
language.
either,
Sorry,
just
I probably can't say that. I apologise.
That's
But it says it all. If we can't say that on air, and barristers are saying this to me, and my regulatory body said they had a right to free speech, and they also had a right to free speech to call another judge an idiot and stupid, and yet I didn't have a right to free speech to talk
Well,
about
that's been
victim
proven
blaming.
otherwise, thank goodness. But you feel that the head of the board, discretionary board, has chairwoman?
Yes, that's right. Yes, she's the chairwoman.
Yeah, you want her to step down?
I think it's right that Catherine Stone, OBE, steps down after this. I mean, she has wasted a huge amount of barristers' money, more than almost £40,000 in council's fees. That's for barristers to represent them. And Mark Neal, who is their Director General, I think he should also step down because, of course, he had oversight of this case, very directly involved, in my opinion. And I'm particularly concerned about the way in which they're trying to clamp down on barristers' right to free speech. And as a woman, I was accused of gender-based derogatory language towards a white male judge in his 70s, a High Court judge. When I was speaking about domestic abuse in his judgment, it wasn't at all about the judge. So I'm very concerned that they don't understand gender equality, diversity, let alone feminism. And I very much feel that I was targeted and attacked for being a woman in this day and age. We should be able to speak out about these issues.
How good does it feel when you're vindicated?
I have to say now, having been through this process myself, I think I understand more what women suffer in the court system. But vindication and that feeling of justice is like nothing else, like being on top of the world, especially after being at one of probably the most rock bottom I've ever been at.
And you didn't tell us at the time.
I didn't, because
you
of
could
course
have been part of the girl gang. We'd have looked after you.
I know. It was confidential, but thank you very much. It's very kind of you.
I think you're going to stay with us, aren't you?
Yes.
Excellent, because we're going to talk about the Pelicot case throughout the course of the day. Parents wanting to get their kids reading face-mounting competition from video games and social media apps. So, how to do it? Joined by the Children's Laureate, Frank Koshel-Boyce. Hi, Frank.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I am good. How do we get kids to read more?
Read to them. That's the thing. Share, you know, you can't teach pleasure. You can only share it. So read to them. That's the thing. Share it yourself. Have a lovely, lovely moment with them. I think that's the answer. Very simple.
You must be flattered and honoured to receive the title. What does it mean to you?
Oh, it's meant a lot to me because I think there's work to be done here. You know, I think our children in this country are suffering from a kind of happiness recession. And I'm absolutely sure that the solution to that is, you know, better bonding, spending more time, more attention. And I feel that the simplest way to do that is to read stories together.
What made you think writing children's books was the right way for you?
Oh, I've got a story about that. I worked in film, I still work in film, and as part of making a movie once, I interviewed a woman in Switzerland who was a Roma gypsy, and in Switzerland in the 1970s, they had this terrible policy of taking Roma children into care very early, and she'd been in all kinds of institutions. She'd really kicked against it. She'd been in prison. She'd had her own kids taken into care. And when I met her, she was this amenable, very articulate person who was working for rights for other nomads. And I said to, at the end of the interview, I said to her, how did you know there was more? You know, she was brought up in these brutal, very regimented institutions. And I said, how did you know there was more to life? How did you know you deserved more? And she said, I read Heidi.
Ah.
And that really stopped me in my tracks. I just thought there's nothing more important than you do than write the right book for the right girl.
I remember reading Heidi as a little girl. What's your favourite book?
My favourite book ever? I mean, at Christmas, I think about Christmas books. So I will always go back to The Fir Tree by Tove Jansson, the woman who wrote The Moomins, which is a book about the Moomins hibernate. But one winter, they're woken by a neighbour who's like, how are you asleep? Christmas is coming. And they get the feeling that Christmas is some kind of tsunami or a monster. And they pick up little bits about Christmas and they try to placate it. They think, if you put a tree up, Christmas will leave you alone. And they put this tree up and they put all their treasure possessions on the tree. And then nothing happens. But all the little creatures from the wood come and look at the tree. And the Moomins think, well, maybe it's for them. And they just go back to sleep. I just love that mixture of panic and madness and finding a true meaning. I love that book.
Frank, it's great to see. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And also thank you for painting your front room this morning the same colour of my top. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you as well. Claire's with us. Girls have stayed with me. Hi, Claire.
Hi.
Hi. Where should we go at Christmas?
Well, it's a great time of year to get away, and whatever floats your boat, there's some great deals out there. So we're still at the end of festive markets. People love a Christmas market. I know you're a big fan, Kay.
I'm not.
Too many people. You can get some really great deals on city breaks, last minute deals if you still want to go and do that before Christmas. You might want to do that from the water, great riverboat cruises where you can see more than one Christmas market. But also New York City at this time of year, I have to say, never seen London looking quite so good as this Christmas. But New York City is a classic Christmas getaway. But of course, now we're also getting into winter sun. People want to escape the gloom. And it's, there's really great short, mid and long haul options from Spain and the Canaries and Morocco, sort of more mid-haul, through to Dubai, Oman, and then longer haul Thailand is really, really popular this year.
Claire, it's Leah. Lovely to see you. Love that tree in the background too. Look, I've got kids, so I don't want to do long haul at Christmas. It's not something I can do. Where should we be going if we want somewhere really close by?
With children.
With children.
Little children.
Where you don't actually have to drive. So I'm thinking trains.
Yeah.
Trains, well, I mean, despite the misery in the UK, trains are, the Brits love rail journeys. And Switzerland is probably the best country in the world for rail travel in terms of you cannot get on a train in Switzerland without some gorgeous view, a panoramic view from the train. They work like clockwork. You can get great deals. There's 15-day rail tickets which present really good value. And, kids it's great because they can sit and look out the window. It's really magical. But also you can trot up and down the carriages, go to the buffet car. And then, of course, at each station, there's really magical places to visit as well. So I would highly recommend. I mean, obviously, Switzerland isn't the cheapest destination, but it can present really great value for families as well.
So, Claire, hi, it's Mari. I'm looking at this list of the kind of most popular destinations here, right? And Lapland's one of them. Now, I've always assumed that going to Lapland would be kind of prohibitively expensive and always a bit of a disappointment. But is that actually really as good as it looks? And is it better to do it last minute, or is it better just to be really, really organised and book it like a year in advance?
Well, I suppose it depends on your family. So we went to Lapland several years ago when my children were perhaps 5 and 8. And we did it very, very well. It wasn't cheap. I don't think you're ever going to get a trip to Lapland where it's cheap, but we certainly did it on a budget. and we stayed in a very basic room, and which obviously had a sauna because they all do, but it was a very basic room in the classic Santa Claus village. And I have to say, it's still one of the most magical holidays that we've had. So it's worth comparing. If you haven't booked for this year, it's worth having a look at the prices. If you were about to leave tomorrow, to look at last minute bargains, but also then looking to see what kind of advance deals you can get. And because, of course, there is the anticipation is part of that trip. So you can either, as a friend has just gone and surprised her kids last minute with it, 4 boys, good luck, Amy. And or you can do as we did, which was tell them they were going to see Father Christmas and just get much more bang for your buck because you've got 3 months of anticipation.
That's a really good idea. Just a final thought before we let you go, Claire, and sort things out for Christmas time. I'm going to a couple of different countries over in the beginning of in January. And it was really important. I didn't know. My son said, "Have you got your visas?" I said, "What?" So you have to make sure that you get visas, because most countries do need a visa. I mean, it's a way of increasing revenue, tourism revenue, and I get that, a tourist tax, totally get it.
Jabs.
And jabs, everything. So where do we find it, Claire?
All at the Times. We've got great destination guides that have all that information online, wherever you're going. Check us out.
There you go. I thought you were going to say the Foreign Office, but that works as well. Other newspapers are available or whatever. Love your top. It's great to see you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
We love Claire, yeah, we do. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News Girl Power. We talk to the water regulator, Ofwat, about how much bills will be going up.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash.
Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes. Sky News, the full story first. I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
This is insane. This was a bustling residential area.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
How difficult is this to police tonight? Off the scale. I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. Sky News, the full story first.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's Senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The holidays just got merrier and brighter.
It's been everything you'd expect and hope for.
Feast your eyes on our favourite time of the year with gifts galore, magical moments, and holiday cheers.
Snappy and certain, right on the line!
Premier League festive fixtures. Premier League festive fixtures on USA.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory
to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Coming up in just a few moments' time, we're going to be speaking to Chris Walters. He is the Senior Director, Price Review, and we'll have more from him as well. And the water regulator, Ofwat, says bills can go up a whopping 36% on average for households over the next 5 years. As I said, Chris Walters will be with us in just a moment or two. Before that, though, Paul is with us, broke the story for us at 7 o'clock when the numbers dropped. Some of them, like Southern, can put their bills up by how much?
53% for Southern Water, which is a company that is in deep financial troubles, carrying about £6 billion of debt. And as if to emphasise the troubles this morning, there are nearly 60,000 people in Southern's area who can't get any clean tap water. They're having to distribute water from stations. There's a problem in in part of the pumping system. It's not the first time it's happened. There are hospitals affected, schools affected. Thames Water, we're looking at the Thames here. I'm not sure where that sewage works is, but Thames bills will rise by 35%, and Thames has huge challenges. So in exchange for these bill increases, the regulator, who we're about to hear from, will let companies spend more than £100 billion. But
what are we going to get for that, Mr. Walters?
Good morning.
What are we going to get for that?
We need record levels of investment to safeguard the health of our rivers, our seas and our waterways, to improve the resilience of our water supplies and to get companies to really raise their game on day-to-day performance in areas that matter for customers and the environment. Now, I know...
That includes, if I may, that includes having water coming out the tap. Southern Water customers don't have that today, and you're letting them put their bills up by 52%.
Let me address the Southern Water incident. We are aware of the incident. It is serious. It's Southern Water's responsibility to engage with and support its customers, especially the most vulnerable customers. The response is being coordinated by government, by DEFRA. As the economic regulator, we don't have a role in the response, but Southern Water will be required to report to us after the event, and we will see what, if anything, needs to be done then.
But they can still increase their bills by 52%.
Southern Water asked for an 83% bill increase,
that's all right, then.
And we pared that back. We pared that back to save customers money. I know bill increases make people angry and make people anxious. Part of my job is to engage directly with customers and their representatives. I hear those concerns firsthand, and I understand them.
I think people are happy to pay for their water. It's a brilliant fact here in the UK that you can turn your tap on and get water, except when you can't. And then if you have all the other issues with sewage and the like, and then we're told that they can put their bills up by an average of 35%, that is going to stick in people's craw.
We are introducing controls in our decisions today to ensure that customers' money is only used for investment. It is ring-fenced. It cannot be used for example, unwarranted dividends or unwarranted bonuses. If it's not used for investment, or if the benefits of that investment don't materialise, it will be automatically clawed back and returned to customers.
This is a haggling process, for want of a better word. You start this process with the companies a year ago. You gave them a number for bills and investment in July. You now got to hear the companies, I think I'm right in saying, asked for £107 billion to spend, and they wanted bills to go up by around 40%. You've said yes to £104 billion and 36%. Have you given the industry basically what it asked for? Have you caved in here?
The demands were closer to 112 than 107 for various technical reasons, and we've pared back £8 billion of that to ensure that customers don't pay more than they need to for this vital investment that's needed to safeguard the health of our rivers, our seas and our waterways, to ensure the resilience of our water supplies. Southern Water example is a great example of why that's needed this morning, and to get companies to raise their game and things that matter to customers and the environment.
But you're also going to let, if I've read this right, you're going to let investors take more out than you were originally going to. There's a cost of capital, let's not get too technical here, but what the amount of money investors put in, the return you're going to let them make, that's more than 4%. You're actually saying not just customers you're going to have to pay more, but the people who in the past have taken money out of water companies, so you can take more. Is that right?
Investment's needed to kick-start the programme of investment that we're talking about. Tens of billions of pounds. And without that investment, customer bills would be hundreds of pounds higher. Now, investors are entitled to a fair return on their investment, and that's what we've set, a fair return. The reason that's moved since our draft decisions in July is because financial markets have moved. Firms operate in global financial markets, and to attract investment to the UK has to remain competitive.
So what you're actually saying is with a privatised system, you have to let the investors take more money out, otherwise they won't stick the money in. We're stuck with this, whether bill payers like it or not.
In order to attract investment, investors need a fair return.
OK, so that takes me to my next question. In your opinion, should the water industry be privatised in this country?
That is a question for Parliament and for government.
What do you think?
I think privatisation is not a silver bullet. If we look around the world, there are various different ownership models. There are various effects of climate change and population growth. It's not obvious to me that privatisation or nationalisation or any particular ownership structure is a silver bullet. But regardless of ownership structure, what's needed now are record levels of investment, the highest investment in any 5-year period since privatisation, to bring back the benefits that we need.
If I could just ask one more. Thames Water, it's in a great deal of trouble this morning, as well as, I'm not sure we've told viewers yet, as well as this bill increase. Ofwat have announced that they're fining Thames £18 billion for paying dividends. Million, thank you. 18 billion really would have been a story, for paying dividends up within the company that it shouldn't have done. This settlement, are you confident Thames can actually survive on the basis of what you've given them by way of bill increases over the next 5 years?
I'm confident that the draft determination, as we call it, the decision today for Thames Water, provides the solid base it needs to recapitalise the company, which it does need to do, and to turn around its performance, which it also needs to do.
OK, we've only got 20 seconds left on the programme. Do these water companies not make you angry sometimes?
My job involves engaging directly with customers and their representatives.
Does it make you angry?
And it makes them angry and it makes me angry, yes.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Really appreciate it.
You're
Love to
welcome.
talk to you for longer, but we're out of time. Thanks a lot. We'll be back in just a couple of moments with all today's top stories, including what's happening with our water. Do stay tuned.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Morning, everybody. It's 8 o'clock. Coming up on the programme for you. On the day, tens of thousands of homes are left without water. We're told bills could go up by an average of 36%.
Plus, Labour MPs line up to criticise Keir Starmer over his pensions U-turn. We'll speak to the government in the next few minutes.
And I'm afraid you'll have to keep dreaming of a white Christmas. Forecasters say it's going to be mild.
Even worse, it's so dark outside and it's 8 o'clock. I mean, I know. Still, it's nearly Christmas, Thursday, 19th of December. Water companies will be able to increase bills by an average of 36% over the next 5 years. Southern Water, which is permitting the biggest jump of 53%, are today apologising to 60,000 homes without water this morning.
Here in Avignon, verdicts are due for 51 men in the mass rape trial that shocked France.
Will Vladimir Putin address Zelensky's recent concessions on the Ukraine war when he delivers his end-of-year press conference here in Moscow?
As I was saying, a Sky News investigation reveals that police attend less than a quarter of shoplifting incidents. And stepping into Christmas with Cara Delevingne, Elton John says he's never looked so good. Paul's here. Water companies. One water company where the, consumers can't get water out the tap this morning can have 52% pay increase.
Absolutely right. We've heard from the regulator Ofwat, which sets the prices in return for what water companies say they want to spend. Waste and water companies and wastewater companies have got those numbers this morning. Southern Water, 53% bills will be going up. They did ask for 83%. That's going to take a Southern Water customer's bill to getting close to £800 over the next 5 years. And that on the day that Southern Water customers around Southampton, about 60,000 of them, can't get fresh water out of the tap. Hospitals affected, schools closed as a result. It does rather emphasise the challenge for the water industry, which says it needs more money to invest, to improve the system, to stop sewage flowing into the rivers and to meet customer concerns. But to do that, it wants to raise bills, and that's what the regulator has allowed them. Thames Water, really troubled, 35% bills will be going up.
That's amazing. I mean, stunning. But, as you pointed out, this is where the problem is with the water supply today, of course. But bills haven't really gone up a lot. I mean, I'm not defending water companies at all, but they haven't gone up a lot over the last few years.
No, they haven't. And, in fact, since privatisation, it's 35 years this year, 1989, bills...
Margaret Thatcher?
Margaret Thatcher. It was the idea was that rather than the state having to find the money to improve our sewerage systems and the like, the money could be raised on the private markets. They were sold debt-free, those companies. Bills, on the whole, they rose for the first decade, but the last decade, bills in real terms today are lower than they were a decade ago. But that is going to end in the next 5 years when bills, on average, will go up more than 36%. The companies say, and the regulator agrees, they're going to double the amount they spend, and they're going to spend £44 billion over this 5-year period on improvements to the system. The rest they're just going to spend on doing their job. Now, this process with the regulator Ofwat's there because the companies in a privatised system, certainly water, there's no competition. I mean, you can't ring up Yorkshire, can we, and say, we'll have water from you instead. So the regulator's there to keep the companies honest, and we've just spoken to Chris Weston, who was, forgive me, that's not Chris Weston, he's the Chief Executive of Thames Water. We've spoken to the man from Ofwat who's been doing this process, and this is what he told me.
Yeah.
We are introducing controls in our decisions today to ensure that customers' money is only used for investment. It is ring-fenced. It cannot be used for example, unwarranted dividends or unwarranted bonuses. If it's not used for investment, or if the benefits of that investment don't materialise, it will be automatically clawed back and returned to customers.
Do water companies not make you angry sometimes?
My job involves engaging directly with customers and their representatives.
Does it make you angry?
And it makes them angry and it makes me angry, yes.
Surprised you said that.
Yeah, it's an honest assessment, isn't it? People are angry, and they're angry because they feel water is a basic resource you don't have any choice as a customer. You are the captive of your water company. And what we've seen become clear over the last 5 years, and lots of things changed really. It was COVID and lockdowns, people spending more time out and about, people swimming in rivers much more for the first time, was how much the system as it's designed, how much sewage is flowing into the rivers, and people assumed that was being dealt with. Now, water quality has improved over the last 30 years, but the sewage outflow problem hasn't been addressed. Fixing that is hugely expensive because it's
antiquated system.
It's an antiquated system. It's designed to do that, to stop the sewage, frankly, ending up in our homes. So expectations have risen when it comes. The problem is, for the companies, much of this is of their own making. If we go back to the 2000s, 2010s, companies were taking out enormous amounts in dividends that many were, frankly, unjustifiable. Thames Water is a good example. The company in the most trouble, it's just been fined this morning for paying dividends within the company. It hasn't actually paid an external dividend to shareholders.
Naughty.
For 7 years, and those shareholders have been wiped out. So there are people losing money in water, and part of this settlement is saying, not just to companies, but to investors out there around the world, you will be able to make a return putting money into water to fix our system, but we're all going to have to pay for it.
OK, for now, thanks very much. Thank you. Now to the trial that has shocked the world. A panel of 5 judges will sentence Gisele Pelicot this morning. Verdicts will also be delivered on 50 other men charged with raping or sexually assaulting his former wife, Gisele. Let's get more on this story. Siobhan, standing by for us this morning. We saw the queues of people waiting to get in earlier. This is such a shocking story, isn't it? What will we hear today?
Yes, and I just want to remind people before we start talking about this that this does contain distressing information. As you can see, I'm outside the court here. We've just crossed the road because we're hoping Gisele Pelicot will arrive in the next few minutes or so. We've actually seen her children entering the court in the last half an hour and some of the defendants as well. And if I just move out the way for you, James can show you that among the press there are women's rights campaigners as well. They've been booing and jeering some of the defendants that have come into court today. And to remind people the background of this case, there are 51 defendants today who are expecting verdicts. They're accused of rape and sex assault. Now, the main defendant in this trial is Gisele Pelicot, the 72-year-old now ex-husband of Gisele, and he has admitted to drugging and raping her for a period of almost a decade. And he says he also invited strangers to their house to allegedly rape her as well. Now, he said in court, "I am a rapist," and he claims all of the men that came to the house knew they were committing rape as well. Many of the defendants, though, in this trial, around 2/3, have denied the charges against them. They say they were tricked by Gisele Pelicot, who manipulated them, and they were told, they believed, some of them, that this was actually a sexual fantasy that the couple had and that they were taking part in that. But this case has really raised the temperature on the debate around rape and drugging and rape in France. So we've seen huge protests happening across the country where people have come onto the streets and demanded more is done. Now, one of the issues that they're really talking about is consent. Consent isn't currently within the French rape law. Some people are asking for that to change. But when you look, there are signs behind me, some of them saying, thank you, Gisele, for your bravery. And I've spoken to some of the women who've come here today, and they say they really feel that because she was so brave in choosing to waive her right to anonymity, in allowing these really distressing details of horrific crimes that have been committed against her to be talked about in open court, that has really meant that France as a whole can talk about this issue a lot more, and they really hope to hear change from that. Now, many are demanding that the sentences that are handed down for those who are found guilty today are the toughest ones possible, and actually prosecutors have asked for sentences totalling more than 600 years for all of those who are in court today. Gisele Pelicot facing the toughest sentence of 20 years, and as I said, he has admitted the charges against him. So we should start hearing, maybe the next half an hour, some of the court verdicts and sentencing coming out.
While we're talking to you, we are seeing, she's so gracious, Gisele is walking with media surrounding her. I'm sure she's walking into court today to look these men in the eye. One convicted so far, as you say, and now ex-husband. 50 others facing charges. They'll find out their fate a bit later on. And Siobhan, a lot of these men lived quite close to each other. This was a very small village where this happened.
Yes, that's a really interesting fact of the case. What I'm going to do, Kay, actually, I'm just going to move out of the way because you've got a better view, and I think Gisele is actually coming near to the front of the gates where we are. So I'm just going to get James to position slightly better at the front there so we can hopefully see Gisele as she walks in. You'll probably hear some applause as she gets closer because that's what's been happening here at court when she's come. For the women who have supported her over the last 4 months. And as you were saying, the men involved in this trial, what's interesting about them is there isn't any clear link apart from the fact that many of them are from the local area. They all come from around 40 miles of Mazan, where the Pelicots live. Now, they range from an ages from 20 to from in their 20s to in their 70s. They do a range of jobs. You can hear the clapping now, so we should be able to see Gisele coming into view now, and she... I'll just let you listen to the reaction.
Justice pour Gisele! Justice pour Gisele! Justice pour Gisele!
So you can hear the women here are shouting, "Justice for Gisele." And as we were saying, many of the men who are accused of raping her are from the local area, and they do a range of jobs. Many of them are fathers. They include, for example, firefighters, a nurse, a journalist as well. And Dominique Pelicot recruited them using a swingers website, and he was on a forum called Without Her Knowledge. And he says that he was inviting them, in their knowledge, he claims, to come to his house and rape his wife. And some of the planning was so sinister. He asked the men, for example, not to wear fragrance and not to smoke so that they didn't leave a scent when they're in their house. He asked one of the men to warm his hands on the radiator. He asked them to park around the corner as well so that people didn't get suspicious, neighbours didn't get suspicious about all the cars coming and going. And I spoke actually to a lawyer of one of the other defendants in this case, and he said that Dominique Pelicot was inviting men to the house around 3 times a week. He was drugging and raping his wife, and she had no idea. He was actually caught really by chance in 2020 because he went to a local shopping centre and he was filming up the skirts of 4 women, and a security guard spotted him, and because of that they stopped him. One of the women filed a complaint. The police started looking into Dominique Pelicot's devices, and they found 20,000 indecent images. Now here she is, you can hear the clamour now as she comes walking into the gates here. The woman who has become the face of this campaign for women's rights, and really a hero now, despite what she's had to endure, the crimes against her, which are so hideous, those admitted by her husband. She has become a hero in France, and as I said, a face of bravery and dignity for many, many women. Now, I was actually at a protest in Paris recently, and I spoke to women in the crowd, and I think what's really interesting about this is the fact that it has mobilised women from different generations to really discuss this issue. But as I said, Kay, we are expecting some verdicts to start coming in, some sentences to start coming in now in about 15 minutes. She's in court. We've seen the defendants go in court, and this is the day where she's hoping to get justice.
Yeah, we can just see her going through the airport type security at the court there. Now she's just so dignified, and she waived her right to anonymity because she said, you know, I am not guilty of this. It's those that have done this to me that are the guilty ones. They're the ones that should feel the shame. To hear some of the allegations against 50 men and her husband who pleaded guilty We will talk about that a little bit later on. Got the Minister with me this morning, Amiata Famboulay. Thought on that?
Just absolutely horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. I mean, it's been heartbreaking to hear it unfold. And, you know, she's just shown so much grace and bravery and dignity and willing to put herself out there to stand up for an injustice. I think is incredible, commendable. But my goodness, no one should have to go through this.
Oh, no. We'll find out what convictions there might be a bit later on. Thoughts on the water companies? One of them getting 52%, and there's no water coming out the taps this morning?
Look, our water industry is broken. I think we'll be the first to point that out. I know that my colleague, the Water Minister in DEFRA, is in touch with the company. We're making sure that we're trying to get water and other supplies to people, and we're trying to get to grip on this. But look, at the heart of this is the fact that the water sector isn't working, because quite frankly, the last government failed to get a grip of the water sector. It failed to ensure that the huge amount of investment that we need in the infrastructure, so everyone knows that our waterways, our sewages are crumbling, and yet instead of investment going into them, it was going into the pockets of water bosses and shareholders. And we can't rewrite the past. We wish we could, but we can't. But what we can do is draw a line under it and turn it around. And that's why we've launched the biggest review of the water sector that we've had since privatisation. And that's why we're driving through reforms to, for example, make sure that we are ring-fencing the money going into the sector to go into investment rather into the pay packets of energy bosses.
Are you content with the amount of money that they're going to be allowed to increase bills by?
Look, people are going to be really angry. Of course they are. We're seeing an increase in bills. No one's going to welcome the news today. The regulator, in the end, has to make a judgment about the bills and the investment that needs to go into the sector. But I think most people also see that our waterways and our sewages are crumbling, that we need investment.
Okay.
And the absolute scandal, and why people are absolutely livid, rightly so, is that this is investment that was needed over the last 15 years. And instead, we had people taking money out of the system, it going into the pay packets of bosses, it going to shareholders, not into the investment. And that's the thing that we've got to turn around.
Tell me about the energy sector.
So, water sector, energy sector, core essentials. I think the thing that's really clear to us is that the energy market isn't working for people, and whether that is sky-high energy bills, whether that's suppliers going bust recently, whether that's too many examples of poor customer service, there's been a big dent in trust in the market. And our view is that we've got to restore that, and a key part of that is looking again at our regulator Ofgem and asking ourselves, does it have the right mandate, does it have the right powers to do the job of standing up for consumers, to make sure the market is working in the way that it should do, and to make sure that people are getting a fair deal. So alongside all the things that we're doing to bear down on energy bills, like running for clean power by 2030, upgrading homes so that they're warm and cheaper to run, we can give people confidence that the energy market is working for them.
OK. You mentioned trust there, Minister. I have to ask you about why not paying WASPI women is the correct decision, given that your boss, his deputy, the Chancellor and others all thought that it was the right decision when you were in opposition.
People are going to be angry about this. And they're
Furious, not angry.
And they're going to be upset, and I know this. And in the end, look, the Chancellor, the Prime Minister have an absolute impossible job against the financial context that we're operating, where things are really, really tight, and lots of calls on funding, whether that is in our NHS, whether that's our schools roofs falling down. There are lots of calls, because we've had 15 years of underinvestment in our public realm, 15 years where things are crumbling, and they have to make a judgment about where to put every pound of public money, and they've made a judgment that it's not into this. I know people will be disappointed about that decision, but in the end, the biggest thing that we have done was uprating the state pension. £470 this year, £1,900 pensioners will be better off over the course of the
you promised them that you were going to do this, and it's about breaking promises. Why are women of a certain age worth less than train drivers?
Look, I don't think anyone believes that to be the case.
So why can train drivers have the money, but the women of a certain age can't?
In the end, this was not in our manifesto, I would say, to start with. And of course, listen...
The boss posed with these women, the Chancellor posed with these women, her mother is a WASPI woman.
Yeah, Kay, listen, there are 101 things I would love us to do as a government. I would love us to do it today. And in the end, the reality of governing is it's hard, and the context and the backdrop that we've inherited is absolutely horrendous. So there are choices, and all those choices won't be popular.
Why are women of a certain age not seen as a public spending priority?
Well, look, they are, and I'd say that
clearly they're not. Clearly they're not.
I would say the fact that we put 30 billion in upgrading the state pension. I would say the fact that we are putting billions into the NHS. We are trying to deliver the change that people voted for us.
Okay.
And in the end, we're having to do that against the backdrop of a really, really tough financial environment.
Question, because we have to truncate this interview because of what we were seeing happening in southern France, and forgive me for that. Do you acknowledge that this perceived hypocrisy will not be easily forgiven?
What I would say is that it's been 5.5 months, and in the end, people will judge us at the end of this Parliament. Now, I was knocking on doors like everyone else.
In answer to my question.
I was knocking on doors like everyone else, and we were elected on a mandate for change. And if we don't deliver that change, people can say they don't trust us. But you've got to give us time to deliver that change. I'm really clear that the fact that we've inherited a country that is in an absolute state. I'm really clear about the change that we need to deliver. And in the end, in 4 and a bit years' time, people will get a chance to judge us, but not after 5.5 months. Judge us after 4 years. Judge us on how we leave the country and whether people feel better off, because that's what we were elected to do.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, do you think that this perceived hypocrisy will be easily forgiven?
Well, look, I don't think it's perceived hypocrisy. Like, in the end, there is every single MP wants to
Baroness
make...
Altman's words this morning in her article in the
Every
paper.
single MP wants to make the country better off. They want to do their bit to improve people's lives. And in the end, the horror sometimes of governing is that you have to make choices. We can't do everything straight away. But what we will do is deliver the mandate for change, because we were very, very clear about that. And people aren't going to like all the decisions that we make. They're not all going to be popular.
Lots of stuff in the manifesto that you have promised and now not delivered.
But we are delivering the things in our manifesto. And, you know, look, I know that this is going to be tough for people. I know people are, as you say, going to be livid. But in the end, we are trying to make decisions in the round. And 30 billion into the state pension, money to the NHS, that matters for people. It matters for those women. And governing is about making choices. And what the Chancellor and the Prime Minister are trying to do is make choices that will advance the purpose and the thing that we're very clear that people want. And that is to change the country and make everyone's lives better off. And that is what we're determined to do.
I must let you go. It's great to talk to you. Merry Christmas. Thank you very much.
Merry
indeed.
Christmas.
Thank you. So, a lot of the programme today will be talking about this lady, Gisele Pelicot. There she is. She's just arrived in court within the last few moments, looking full of grace and graciousness, as we were saying. She's facing her ex-husband, who pleaded guilty to some of the most abhorrent crimes that any woman could possibly imagine. She was in her place of trust. She was in her own bedroom with her husband, and the behaviour of that man we'll hear about in court again today. He has pleaded guilty. 50 other men also charged with raping her. They will find out their fate today. 30 other men could not be identified in the video. What videos? Her husband videoed it. I don't know what to say about that. I know.
There's no words. OK, there's no words.
Anyway, we'll hear what the verdict is and the decision of the court in about an hour's time. What did you make of what we heard from the Minister?
So, with the Minister, I mean, first of all, let's just focus on WASPy women. Now, she was really giving it her best in terms of trying to defend the government's decision not to give these women the compensation that they've been asking for, that Labour in opposition has been calling for them, ironically. And, I mean, the difficulty is there isn't really an easy answer, right? So she was essentially trying to say, you know, people are right to be angry and upset. You know, she acknowledged that people felt that way. And so there was an acknowledgement there of the outrage, but basically, tough is the line, right? So we don't have the money, tough. And so she kept saying, you know, it's about difficult decisions, it's about managing the public finances. And so really the suggestion is, it's not that we don't think we deserve it, it's more that we don't have the money for it, or we don't think it's enough of a priority
You have the money,
to
it's
find
about
the money.
priorities.
Exactly. There's always money to be found. You just got to find it in a different place, right? And again, you know, the same line we keep hearing from Labour: it was not in the manifesto. It was not in the manifesto. First of all, just because it's not in the manifesto doesn't mean you didn't make promises. Doesn't mean you didn't give people hope and an idea or a suggestion of things. But also, not to be too pointed on this, however, to say, oh, it's not in the manifesto, would argue that you always keep all your manifesto promises.
I know.
And we know that
I did say
governments
that.
don't, which means it's slightly worthless to say it's not in the manifesto, because whether it is or it isn't, promises continue to be broken in either direction.
Absolutely. Charlotte's with us as well, a barrister at Goldsmith Chambers, talking to us about what's happening in France at the moment. I don't know how she holds herself together, but she holds her head high, and in she went to face all of those men that one convicted so far, he pleaded guilty, the other 50, can you believe that?
Oh, my God.
I know. We'll hear their fate very shortly. And she's going to look them in the eye.
Yes, she is. And I hope that for her sake and for all the women around the world that have been watching this now unfold for many months, that she gets the justice that she deserves, having put herself through a horrendous trial, which, as you say, has been opened up to the world. And I'm reminded myself of what she has been through whilst in this marriage that was obviously involving rape and being drugged by her own husband that she had no idea about. He was taking her along to the doctors when she complained about pelvic pain, and when she said that she felt groggy, she wondered what was going on. She thought she may have dementia. And he was taking her along, gaslighting her, was indulging that, knowing all along that he was raping and drugging his wife and putting her for sale, not even for any money, in fact, but on a website so that other men in the local area could also join in. And I reminded myself as well of the text messages that were sent between the husband and these other men who have wives, who have daughters, who have normal, inverted commas, jobs, civil servants, you know, those in the fire service. And I just think it's absolutely despicable. And it makes me wonder just how prevalent raping of women whilst they are drugged or whilst they're asleep actually is. I've certainly worked as a barrister on cases involving rape whilst women are unconscious, whether they're asleep or they have been intoxicated. And I think one of the remarkable things about this case is, of course, the significant amount of footage that there is to prove the rape. Imagine if she thought she was being raped by her husband, and she may have had some dreams or nightmares about that, but couldn't actually prove it. I wonder then whether the police would have believed her. And, of course, we remember that this all came about because of him upskirting a woman in a shop. And thank goodness to the police officer who actually examined his hard drive, because Lord knows how many police officers have access to hard drives like that. They've either gone missing in the police station, they haven't bothered to look them up. We know how under-resourced the police are and are sitting potentially on a landmine that could save very many women's lives.
And Charlotte, you know, you mentioned all the video footage, all the receipts of evidence, and despite all of that, Gisele's treatment in the stand, what did you make of it?
I mean, I suppose I'm almost used to seeing it because I've, you know, watched the cross-examination of victims, rape victims in court. And I still find it very upsetting and sometimes distressing to watch. You know, some people have said it's like watching a wounded animal being tortured, because they are expected to relive the trauma of the rape on that stand, whilst their version of reality and what happened to them is put through almost like a magnifying glass, and they are being told actually what happened to you is not the truth, and then they're having to withstand really under a lot of pressure, sometimes quite aggressive, intense cross-examination. We saw that with her, and I have to say all credit to her for speaking out about that and saying victims deserve better. We deserve a justice system that speaks up for victims, that protects them, not standing side by side sometimes with perpetrators, not in all cases, but in some.
You're watching live pictures from the south of France. To the left of your screen, you can see Gisele Pelicot arriving at the courtroom. She'll be hearing very shortly what will happen to her ex-husband, who has admitted countless rape allegations against him, and also 50 other men who have pleaded not guilty. What will happen to them? Stay tuned for more here on Sky.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion that's just come down. I think it was a monster just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States. It's a border where they're not welcome, and yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks, but taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
There's been an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change. We've been crushed. Free from wherever you get your news. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine. The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world. Sky News, the full story first. Hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers. We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
This conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle. Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. A large portion of our programme this morning surrounds Gisele Pelicot, who has just arrived in court in the south of France. Siobhan Robbins is there. Siobhan, for those who just joining us, tell us about this story.
Morning, Kay. Just a warning before we start, this is a distressing case, and that I will be talking about distressing details. Now, as you say, Gisele Pelicot has arrived in court. She is the woman at the centre of this mass rape trial, which has really gripped France, but sent really reverberations around the world. Now, her husband, her ex-husband now, has admitted drugging and raping her for almost a decade and inviting strangers to come to the house and allegedly rape her as well. So he is on trial. Alongside him are 50 other men accused of rape and sexual assault. And it's alleged that they knew that they were raping her, but around 2/3 of the defendants have denied that. They have said that they believed that they were being invited to take part in a sexual fantasy by the couple and that Gisele had given her consent to Dominique. Now, Dominique Pelicot was caught actually by chance in 2020. He'd started drugging his wife in 2011 when they lived in Paris, and then they moved to this area in Provence, which is probably an area a lot of people know at home, in southeastern France. And at that point, he escalated his behaviour. So from 2013, he started inviting other people online, men that he met in an online chat room called Without Her Knowledge. And he was caught by chance, as I said, in 2020, because he'd gone to a local shopping centre and he was trying to film up the skirts of women. He'd been filming up 4 women's skirts, and the security guard in the shopping centre had spotted him. And because of that, the security guard confronted him. The security guard, in a video taken at the time, can be heard telling one of the women, "You need to make a complaint." That woman did make a complaint. Police investigated, and they seized devices belonging to Dominique Pelicot and found 20,000 indecent images. And many of those images showed a woman seemingly lying motionless while different men, had sex with her. Now, Gisele Pelicot knew nothing of what was happening. She believed, she told the court during the evidence, that she had the perfect husband, until in 2020 she was called into a police station and police said, "We need to show you something," and began showing her one photograph of what was happening, a second photograph. At the third photograph, she said, "Stop." And she has said that she was treated by those men like a rag doll, like a bag of garbage. And prosecutors have said that they should get, in total, these 51 men on trial, including Dominique Pelicot, a sentence of more than 600 years in prison. And they've asked for the maximum sentence for Dominique Pelicot of 20 years in prison. Now, we are waiting for this verdicts and sentencing to begin. Just to explain to people at home how we're doing this. So I'm outside. Security's really, really tight here. So 2 of our team are in the court behind. We've got someone sitting in, listening to the verdicts as it happens. They'll be sending the information out to me. I'll be telling you directly. So we will be bringing it to you as it happens. But you can imagine this is a huge case. I know now that Gisele Pelicot is already in the courtroom. She's there. She's sitting next to her children. There are 2 glass boxes where the defendants will come in. We expect Dominique Pelicot to be sentenced first, and we'll hear then if he gets this maximum 20-year sentence.
We saw her arriving, as we said, with her 3 adult children, I think, with her as well. Caroline was there, David and also Florian. They have been hugely supportive of their mother throughout.
It's been such a distressing case, of course, for Gisele, but also having to break this to her family, because Dominique and Gisele had 3 children. They have 7 grandchildren. And as I said, she believed, and her children believed, that this was a good man, a family man. And actually, Dominique's lawyer has argued there are 2 Dominiques. There's this family man who managed to keep up this facade so that everyone liked him, all his friends, all the family friends liked him, no one was suspicious, no one even caught on that he might be carrying out these horrific crimes. And then on the other side, there was this merciless monster, essentially, who was plotting very precisely these horrendous crimes about the person who trusted him the most. And some of the saddest evidence that we've heard, in a sense, from Gisele is the fact that over this almost decade period, her health started fading because he'd been using sleep-inducing drugs, which are used to treat anxiety. He'd mixed them into her food. And so she thought at one point that she had this great husband who was making her all these meals, when in fact he was actually using the opportunity to dose her up with these drugs so he could then invite strangers to the house to attack her. And at one point she had some medical complications because of this. She got 4 sexually transmitted infections. She couldn't understand what was going on. And he was there holding her hand at the doctors when she thought she had a brain tumour or Alzheimer's because she was blacking out. He knew the whole time it was because actually he'd been drugging her, and she had no idea, and she was confiding in him. And the whole time he managed to keep this division of personality until he was caught, as I said, by chance, spotted in a supermarket upskirting, and that unveiled this whole horrendous library of abuse.
I'm shaking my head in disbelief as you're giving me more and more information about this case, Siobhan. Dr. Charlotte is still with us here in the studio, a barrister at Goldsmith Chambers. what surprises me, and I don't know whether it's the case here in the UK as well, is some of these men that have been charged with these horrendous crimes, not yet convicted, just a husband who pleaded guilty, the other 50 not yet convicted. Not all of them are on remand.
No, they're not, and that is, I'm afraid, quite common, and it does happen. And I think there have been calls in this country, I know, by some rape survivors to review the law in that respect. And I think it does also perhaps signal the way in which rape is treated is not as serious, for example, as terrorism, where you imagine a very different response would be taken because of the risk to the public safety. And yet, arguably, men who rape women in such an egregious way, particularly go onto a website to find these women, potentially even, it's just too harrowing, I have to say. I get goosebumps thinking about it. And you think about how dangerous they potentially are.
I think also it makes me worry about, how long have we been talking about the level of rape convictions in the UK? And we know that the rape conviction rate in this country is so low, and it's been low for many, many years. And we've had successive governments saying that they would improve it and sort it, and yet we're still where we are, where rape victims often never see justice, and that's what's so depressing.
Yes, and that's one of the things I think that Gisele Pelicot was talking about, that she hopes this will give more women courage to come forward and report. Yet, as you rightly say, that conviction rates are so low that even when women do come forward and report to the police, it's very rare that rapists are charged, even see the light of day within a criminal court context. So I do think that can discourage survivors from coming forward, and the government needs to do something about the low rape convictions, because otherwise it's sending out a message that ultimately men can rape with impunity. I mean, the thought that Dominique Pelicot, who raped his wife, drugged her for more than a decade, could serve up to 20 years in prison, and that's it. That's about 2 years in prison for every year of which he's been raping and drugging his wife. Is that really justice?
Siobhan, outside the courthouse, we're seeing people with banners. There's a huge police presence too. Such appetite there's been for this case, but there'll be a lot of soul-searching, I imagine, after we hear the verdicts today.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. And having been at the protests, some of the protests that have been held across France that have been inspired by this trial, there is a huge strength of feeling. I mean, I can't turn the camera around, but on the wall that I'm looking at here, there is a massive banner that says Merci Gisele. There is graffiti all around Avignon with her face on and saying that slogan that, well, has become a slogan now, which was one of the things she said, shame must change size. And it is that bravery in waiving her anonymity and saying, this horrendous thing happened to me, something that no one would ever want the details, let alone the images, to be seen by other people. But she took that step because she said, I have to have this out in the public so that we can all talk about it. She has been very candid that France has to change, that she believes that it's a patriarchal society, that there isn't enough awareness of drugging and rape in particular, and there are misconceptions around it. For example, the idea that you only get drugged and your drinks only get spiked if you're in a club. That isn't what happens. And actually, it's really interesting. I was reading some background about drugging in France and rape here, and one of the main helplines for women that's been set up here has said that since this case has happened, they've seen a massive increase in women calling in saying, I think I'm being drugged, I think I'm being raped by my partner. And actually, the main people who are being identified as the culprits in these crimes are often partners or people within marriages. And it really is the Gisele effect, I guess, that has really emboldened other victims to feel that they can come forward without shame. And as she said during the trial when she gave evidence, if I want one thing to happen, it's so that other victims of rape can think, if Mrs. Pelicot can do this, I can do this. And I really think if nothing else changes after this trial, which many here hope will, and there are other discussions around changing the law, I think it's that strength and that idea that it isn't the victim who should be ashamed, that it really is the perpetrator of these crimes who are to blame, and society needs to underline that here.
Absolutely, Siobhan. I believe the verdicts, the first one will be a ex-husband, are just a few moments away now, so we will continue to chat to you. I wonder if you could just describe for us what's actually happening in the courtroom and how this process is working. I believe there are 2 large glass boxes in there.
Yeah, so basically, when you go inside that court, there's a dedicated courtroom which has been holding this trial for the last 4 months, and there's a big sort of bench at the back where the 5 judges, so it's 5 judges, different system to the UK, not a jury system, 5 judges who are deliberating and have been deliberating about the sentences and the verdicts that they're going to hand down. And then there are benches where lawyers can sit and members of the press, and each defendant today is allowed 1 family member to represent them in court. So they'll have 1 person there on sort of supporting them. And then there are these 2 glass boxes on the side, and one of the boxes has been used throughout the trial for Gisele Pelicot, and then the other one for the other defendants. So we'd expect them to come in. We are expecting Gisele Pelicot to come in first because, of course, he has admitted the charges against him. He has admitted that he drugged and raped his wife for almost a decade, and he has admitted that he deliberately invited other men to rape her as well. So we expect him in first, and then we don't know the order of the others. And it's quite interesting, in this group, a group of other 50 men on trial, the majority are accused of rape. One of them actually isn't accused of raping Gisele. He's been called the disciple, and this is a man that Dominique actually taught how to drug his own wife, and then they're accused of raping this other man's wife. So that's one of the other people. And then the others are a mixture of people who are being accused of rape, and then 1 person of sexual assault. But as I said, the majority deny the charges. So we should be getting the verdicts any minute now. I know that the presiding judge is there. The session has begun. I'm getting this from my colleagues in court. They're saying that they have begun calling out the names of all of the defendants now, as well as the charges. So they'll be going through this long charge list. The majority, as I said, charged with aggravated rape, 1 of aggravated sexual assault. So that's what's happening inside the court right now.
OK, Dr. Charlotte here with us, a barrister at Goldsmith Chambers. No jury system.
No, very different in France to in this country. And one of the interesting things is that you might recall in Scotland not so long ago, they were thinking of piloting a new system whereby rape cases would be judged by a judge rather than a jury. And I think part of the reason was because of the backlogs, but also making sure that judges are specifically trained, of course they're legal experts, but trained in memory, trauma, rape stereotypes, preventing those myths from playing out in the courtroom. And I think other jurisdictions as well also have judge trials by when it comes to rape. One of the interesting things, and I have to say I don't know the answer to this in France, I'd be interested to know, is where the judges actually give a full judgment. So you get the reasons as to why they find that individual guilty or not guilty. And I just wanted to say, in terms of the significant amount of footage that was uncovered in Gisele Pelicot's possession and control, is that that's one of the very unusual features in this case, that Gisele is able to prove, or the state's able to prove, that he has raped and drugged her, although of course we know that he has pleaded guilty to that. Without that footage, one queries whether in fact you would secure a conviction.
Guilty of aggravated rape, Monsieur Pelicot. Siobhan?
Yes, that's just come in the last few seconds. Monsieur Pelicot, guilty of aggravated rape against Gisele Pelicot, guilty. So the prosecutors already asked for a maximum sentence of 20 years for the crimes that he's accused of. There's another verdict coming in. I'm just waiting for that to come through. He's guilty of the illegal broadcast of images. So that, of course, is in relation to this file of up to 20,000 indecent images that police found, and he had meticulously organised this file. He seemed to have a fascination with pornography, and in some of the videos that he filmed of his motionless wife being raped, You can hear him talking in the background. And actually, when the police found the videos, they weren't just, you know, the raw videos. He'd actually edited them into these sinister collections. He's guilty of recording images of Gisele Pelicot as well. Now, they are just continuing with that information going through. As I said, the setup we've got here is very tight security because, of course, this is a high-profile case. So there are concerns about, one, Gisele Pelicot being overwhelmed. Two, they don't want any violence to break out around this because there are a lot of very angry people about this case, particularly about these 51 men on trial. So we've got a team inside who are feeding me information live, and I am then telling it to you. So guilty of recorded images. This is another guilty verdict coming in here. And this is of 2 other women as well. Now, just to give you a little bit of background around some of the wider allegations that we heard in court around, facing Dominique Pelicot. So, of course, the main things that we'd heard about were what he did to Gisele Pelicot. However, prosecutors said that among these files of images that they found, they also found recordings of his son's wives, that he'd set up hidden cameras in the bathrooms and in bedrooms in the house and had recorded them naked and then shared them online. He was also accused of having a portfolio, a folder of images of his daughter. Now, she is deeply distressed by this case, not only because of what happened to her mother, which her father has admitted, but because in these images she says she's seen partially clothed but wearing underwear that she doesn't recognise, and she is extremely concerned that he, as well as drugging and raping her mother, drugged her as well. Now, he has always denied that in court. He said he didn't touch his children, but there was an outburst towards the end of this trial where she said, "You're a liar, you are a liar, you will die alone like a dog in prison." So that is what they are handing down the verdicts here. Guilty of recording images of 2 other women. And a reminder, of course, that Dominique Pelicot pleaded guilty. They're now moving on to some of the other defendants in the case. So the next person that we expect to get verdicts on are of this guy, Jean-Pierre M. Now, this is this man who actually isn't accused of attacking Gisele Pelicot. This is the man I told you about before, the disciple, the man that Dominique Pelicot...
Just squeeze in there, if I may, please.
Sick art.
Just to say that Jean-Pierre M. has been found guilty.
Yeah, so Jean-Pierre M. found guilty. As I said, he hadn't attacked Gisele, but he is accused of being this disciple who was taught by Dominique Pelicot how to drug and rape his wife, and then raped his own wife using that technique. So we're now moving on. Charlie A., he's guilty as well of rape. Charlie A. actually is one of the youngest defendants in this case. He was in his 20s. He was accused of raping Gisele Pelicot 6 times. I actually spoke to his defence lawyer earlier in the week, and their defence was that they didn't know it was rape, that they said that Dominique Pelicot was extremely manipulative, and that Charlie A. believed that he was going to the house because he'd been told by Dominique Pelicot that actually his wife was very timid and that she wanted to be involved in this, but she liked to watch the videos afterwards, so she would be drugged when he arrived, but this was totally consensual. That's what he'd said. The judges have decided that's not true. They've found him guilty. Another person, Christian L., also found guilty, so these verdicts continuing to come in.
Also found guilty, as you said. Just clarify something for me, if you would, please, Siobhan. Why are we getting the guilty verdicts for him now, given that he pleaded guilty?
Do you mean for Dominique Pelicot? It's because
I do.
it's a slightly different system here in France. It's a slightly different system here in France. So if you go to court in the UK, you have this process where at the beginning, often the defendant is asked, how do you plead? And they say guilty or not guilty. Doesn't really work like that here. Basically, as part of his evidence, it's more of an interrogation trials here, more of an investigation. And as part of his evidence, he said, I am a rapist. I did this. So this is now the formal process of finding him guilty, and once they formally found him guilty, they will then use that to build the basis of how they sentence him.
Okay. And all of the charges against him, you said they're pushing for 20 years for the aggravated rape. Will the other charges carry an extra sentence?
My understanding is that the whole sentence that they're pushing for him is 20 years. You've got to remember, this is a man who's 72 already. If he's given 20 years, it's highly likely, his health is bad anyway, it's highly likely that he will die in prison. And actually, this isn't the end of the investigations into Dominique Pelicot. One of the other defence lawyers said he's an extremely dangerous man, and actually what happened in Mazan, where the Pelicots lived, is probably just the tip of the iceberg, because we know that police are investigating him over a rape and murder that happened in Paris in 1991, a crime he's denied being involved in, but also over an attempted rape that happened in 1991, which he has admitted being involved in after his DNA was found at the scene. So it doesn't stop here.
I'm just going to let you gather some more verdicts for us, if you would. I don't know if you know, in France, if they get sentenced to 20 years, do they serve 20 years?
I don't know.
Like here?
I don't know. No. I don't know, but 20 years to me doesn't seem nearly enough. I appreciate that he may die in prison, but he should be sentenced to the crimes that he's committed, and I think given a just sentence. I don't think 20 years, as I say, which equates to 2 years per year drugging and raping his wife, coupled with all of the other things he's been involved in, is nearly enough.
Anna Toumazov is a French feminist activist and radio host, and joining us now. Anna, he had already pleaded guilty, Pelicot. We're now hearing that others are being convicted as well. Jean-Pierre M, guilty. Charlie A, guilty. He raped her 6 times. He's only in his 20s. And Christian L, also guilty. Your thoughts? Good morning.
Good morning.
Tell me your thoughts.
Actually, like this trial was very long. Here in France, we just talked about that. We kept talking about that, and it was a really important moment of awareness about rape culture. And I'm very relieved today to see that they are condemned.
Yeah. How has she been viewed in France? We're sitting here this morning, including with a British barrister. We're all staggered at how composed she can remain during this.
Yeah, Gisele Pelicot is nowadays seen as the heroine in France because she got this bravery to make everything public because she wanted to really spread awareness about what happened to her, to make sure that it won't happen again to another woman. And we can also talk about the bravery of her family, of her daughter Caroline Darion, that we heard a lot also. Like this family is really heroic.
I hear you. We're going to wait for, apparently we will only hear the sentencing after all 51 verdicts have been handed down by the justices in the court, Anna. We're hearing also that the biggest amount of time that Dominique Pelicot could spend in prison would be 20 years. Do you have a view on that?
No, actually, in France, you can't go in jail for your whole life for real, because like he will be sentenced the maximal possible sentence. but that's all. But you know, he is already old. It will be long, so.
Okay. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us, Anna. We very much appreciate you taking the time. We will continue to monitor these verdicts as they are handed down. If you're just tuning our way, we are referring to Gisele Pelicot. She arrived at court about half an hour ago, surrounded by her 3 adult children, to hear the verdict on her now ex-husband, Dominique Pelicot, who had admitted drugging his wife, then wife, and then allowing potentially up to 80 men to rape his wife. He then kept all of those videos and shared them on websites. He also, apart from being found guilty of that, as you just see the clock go through to 9 o'clock here on The Breakfast Show on Sky. He's also been found guilty of recording images of Gisele while she was drugged. Also illegal images of others as well, and suggestions of an offence connected to 2 other women. We need to get more information on that. Nobody better to do that for us than Siobhan, who's standing by outside the court for us right now. So, Siobhan, just bring us up to speed on what we do know so far.
So what we know so far is that the main defendant, if you like, in this case, Dominique Pelicot, the man who admitted drugging and raping his wife, Gisele, for almost a decade and inviting strangers to come to their house and rape her as well, has been found guilty of aggravated rape. He's been found guilty of illegal broadcast of images of Gisele Pelicot, guilty of recording images of Gisele Pelicot, and guilty of recording images of 2 other women. Now, as well as him, we are also getting really fast and furiously now guilty verdicts coming in for some of the other men. So Jean-Pierre M., the man called the Disciple, who actually isn't accused of raping Gisele but was taught how to drug and rape his own wife, has been found guilty of raping his own wife 12 times. Charlie A. has been found guilty. He was the youngest defendant in this trial. He was accused of raping Gisele 6 times, including on the evening of her birthday. Christian L. found guilty. Cyril D. found guilty. He was a tradesman accused of raping Gisele Pelicot once at the house in 2019. Jack C. found guilty. Nicholas F. found guilty. That's a journalist, Nicholas F., accused of raping Gisele once at the house in 2018. Lionel R. guilty, Florian R. guilty, Simone M. guilty, Patrice N. guilty, and all of these men are guilty of aggravated rape so far. Cyprian C. guilty, Matteo D. guilty, Quentin H. guilty, Cyril B. guilty, Nazir H. guilty. Now, he was unemployed, and it's interesting to note, actually, that while there wasn't a clear link between these men, the majority of them live within a 40-mile radius of Massan, and actually the majority of them had jobs, the majority of them had families, some of them were fathers, and I spoke to a psychologist about this recently, and she was saying that these men, like Dominique Pelicot, were living a double life. On one side, they were the upstanding members of society, the journalist, for example, who's been found guilty, and then on the family men. And on the other side, they were going onto this website, going into a chat room without her knowledge, which is what it was called, and then signing up to go to Dominique Pelicot's house and rape his wife. More guilties. We haven't had any not guilty yet as they come in.
Yeah, I see that there have been a significant number. Is it 20 that we've seen so far, all guilty, waiting for 51 verdicts in total? Lots of people waiting outside. I'm guessing many of them are not journalists. There's a lot of anger you were telling us about earlier on, Siobhan, and to that end, there's a lot of security around the courtroom today.
Yes, that's right. Behind me, and you can see on your screens, people standing at the gates there, one of them holding that huge banner that says, "Thank you for your courage, your bravery, Gisele Pelicot." And the women have been cheering and clapping as she came in. When they've seen defendants, they've been booing them and shouting at them as they came in. And many of these women actually have been coming here to support Gisele over the last 4 months. And I think that must have given her so much strength to walk in every day, because she has attended this trial every single day that it's sat. Of course, she had the choice not to, but she has come and been dignified and sat in that courtroom and looked the men accused and now many found guilty of raping her in the eye every single day. And she said at the end of the trial, which is really interesting, this is a trial of cowardice. None of you went to check. None of you raised the alarm. None of you asked if I was okay, and you all had that chance. Now, the guilty verdicts continue to come in. Karim S. guilty, Roden A. guilty. And as I say, the majority of these that are coming in at the moment are for rape, aggravated rape. Gisele is looking at every defendant as they stand and listening to the verdict as well. So she's clearly focused on the men that she's seen in these videos attacking her, that she only found out had attacked her because the police showed her. She's now watching as justice is delivered to the first half of these men, at least. As you say, 51 verdicts we're waiting for, and they're coming out fast.
Yeah. Dr. Charlotte is with us still. Dr. Charlotte Proudman, barrister at Goldsmith Chambers. French media calling it a verdict for the future.
Yes, I mean, I hope it is a verdict for the future, and I hope that this signals that men who rape women will not get away with it, and they will be found guilty and they will be sentenced. I know we're waiting on what the sentencing is going to be. And I also hope that it signals that women will be believed as well when they take the courageous, brave step to report, rather than treat them with a great deal of suspicion and treat them as if they're the ones on trial, which at times I have to say we did see in the Gisele Pelicot case, where she said herself, you know, she felt that she was being put on trial as if she was a defendant. And of course, she's a victim of some of the most harrowing crimes that I think we've ever heard of.
What's your view on those that have been raped and have to go to court, saying, you know what, I don't want to be anonymous because it will mean that stories like this, you know, will reverberate around the world. If she hadn't said no to relieving her anonymity, then I'm guessing it would have been a very different case.
It would. It would have been a very different case, wouldn't it? We probably wouldn't have anywhere near as much media attention, and she wouldn't have been held up as an icon and a heroine in the way that she has, because we wouldn't be able to have an image of her. We wouldn't know who she is. We wouldn't know a name. She'd probably be known by either a pseudonym or a letter. There is now, I think, a growing movement of women in this country that are waiving and forgoing their right to anonymity, often not during the trial, but after a conviction for rape. And I'm thinking of a number of different women who've done that, such as Ali Wilson. Jade Blue is another woman, and they waived their right to anonymity to speak out about what they had been through, whether in the police stage of reporting in Jade Blue's case, and then going through what she did to make sure that she secured some sort of justice after a sexsomnia defence was raised on his behalf, wrongly so, or in Ellie Wilson's case where her rapist was actually convicted. And as a result of them speaking out, I think it's attracted more light and understanding in terms of what victims go through. But I'm also conscious as well of the backlash that they have suffered, and they've spoken out about that, and very many other rape victims. And you think, how can rape victims suffer a backlash? But of course they do. Unfortunately, online you get a lot of misogyny, even death threats, rape threats, to do that to them all over again, because how dare they speak out about the trauma and tragedy that they have suffered. So again, with light can come darkness, but if more women felt able and strong enough, and of course I appreciate the circumstances, you know, vary for different women, but to be able to speak out, I think
Georgia Harrison as well.
Absolutely. I mean, so courageous. But it does, I think, signal a big change in society, because we say these are women who've been raped. You know, they're not outliers. They often are average, normal women in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 70s in Pelicot's case. It happens to all of us, I'm afraid to say, whether it's sexual harassment at one end of the spectrum, whether it's the catcalling, inverted commas, on the street, or at rape at the other end of the spectrum, we all as women will suffer some form of violence against us in everyday life.
I believe that she, Madame Pelicot, is staring in the eye every single one of these men that stand up when they hear their fate. Siobhan, where are we up to now?
We've got 33 verdicts by my count, all of them guilty. I'm actually joined now by French broadcaster Agnès Poirier, and I wanted to talk to you about how this has affected France, because, you know, looking at these verdicts coming in, guilty, 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 against a mixture of men from a range of age groups. We know they were ranged from in their 20s to their 70s. The majority had jobs. How has it affected France that this wide group of men seem to have been involved in this sordid crime with no clear link between them?
Well, it is extremely profoundly affecting, because we're talking about potentially our colleagues, our brothers, our fathers, our uncles, our friends. We're talking, you know, the range, the youngest being 22 at the time, 74. Most of them are, according to psychologists, normal people, inverted commas, with an average intelligence, no problem in their life. I mean, a quarter of them had a difficult childhood, but, you know, they are family men, they are well integrated, they have friends, they have jobs, and yet they were there in that bedroom. And, you know, there are so many answers there are so many questions we will never get answers for. And Gisele Pelicot, you know, went every day to get explanations. But how come, you know, normal men finding themselves in front of that inert woman, unconscious woman, stayed, you know? And as Gisele Pelicot's lawyer said, the question is not why you were there, but why you stayed.
I think that's a really good point that's just been made there by Agnès, that many of these men said, I didn't know it was rape, but time and again, Gisele Pelicot in different ways has made the point in this trial. When you walked into that room, you saw a motionless woman. You didn't stop to ask. You could have left. You could have said, this feels wrong. You could have waved a red flag to the police, but none of them did. And that is why she is so angry. Of course, in addition to the fact that these horrendous crimes have been carried out against her, but also the idea that she didn't recognise any of these men. There was one person she said that she'd seen in passing in the bakery, but she knew none of these men, yet they felt it was within their right to come to her home, the place she felt safe, and rape her while she was basically unconscious.
Okay, Siobhan, stay with us, but we want to bring it back to Dr. Charlotte here in the studio for a moment. What do you think this says about rape culture across France? Because these 50 men were so easily attracted by Dominique Pelicot.
Well, I think it says a lot about rape culture generally, including in this country as well. It's how prevalent rape is, that some men do want to rape drugged women, and it's something that they not only, I suppose, fantasise about, but will actually take steps to search out online. And I find it extraordinary to hear men say, I didn't know that was rape. Well, if you didn't know that was rape, what on earth is rape? If you're on a website which is all about drugging and raping women such that they don't know that's happening to them and you're getting sexual gratification from it, or where you think that a woman's consent can be given through her husband in a context where you never speak to her, then you should not be having sex because you clearly don't understand consent.
Siobhan, we are waiting until the end of all 51 verdicts, and then we'll hear what the sentencing is.
Yes, that's right. We know that prosecutors have been very clear that they want more than 600 years in total for all of the 51 men who are involved in this trial. They've asked for the toughest sentence of 20 years to be given to Dominique Pelicot. They've also asked for a tough sentence of 17 years to be handed down to Jean-Pierre M., which is the man called his disciple, who isn't accused of raping Gisele Pelicot, but learnt how to drug and rape his own wife from Dominique Pelicot. And then a various range of other sentences being requested, ranging from 4 years and, as I said, up to the top of 20 years. We're getting towards the end. There are more coming in now. Mohammed R. guilty, Ludwig B. guilty, Patrick A. guilty. Just to go back to some of the men who've already been found guilty, one of them, Charlie A., he was the youngest defendant, 22 at the time when he started going to the Pelicot's house. He raped Gisele 6 times, including on her birthday. We also have Andy R. found guilty. He raped Gisele Pelicot on New Year's Eve. Among the others who have been found guilty so far, we've got a journalist, we've got a salesman, tradesman. It's a mix of people from different backgrounds here that are in court. What the prosecutors have called Mr. Everyman, because they're from so many different backgrounds. Most have jobs, most have families, and it appears most were living a double life.
Siobhan, I'm just looking, Hassan O. guilty, but he's currently on the run, believed to be in Morocco, the only one of the 51 defendants not to give evidence. Why are these men being afforded the courtesy of anonymity?
Because it's the legal system. And so even though many here would feel, you know, why do they have the right when they are accused of such heinous crimes? It's justice system. So until you are found guilty, you are innocent until proven guilty, as we all know. And that's the same system here in France. So they are afforded protection, which involves us being allowed to say their first name but not their surnames. Also, it's for protection of their families, because this has been such a high-profile case. You can imagine how many people might feel that it would be appropriate for them to try and meter out their own revenge. That's something, of course, that the justice system, the police, do not want to happen. And so that's some of the reasons why they make sure that we only say the first name and the initial of the men on trial here.
OK. Blandine Develon, founder of Les Amazons d'Avignon, is with us. As you listen to these guilty verdicts coming in, Blandine, what are your thoughts?
Justice has to be done, and it's normal. These men are rapists, so they are found guilty to be rapists. So now we want them to go to jail for a very, very, very long time. And we want society to be protected from these men.
We were still waiting to hear what that conviction will look like for each of the men. How important has it been for Madame Pelicot that she waived, or not just for her, but for the whole trial, that she waived her right to anonymity?
Yes. As a victim, she had the right to have a private trial, but she chose to have a public process, that everything will be public, and she asked for everything to be public. And it's very important because we could see the videos and all the evidences, and the public and the media could see everything. And that's why she made
if I can just stop you there, Blandine, please. Yes. Monsieur Pelicot has been sentenced to the maximum 20 years. 20 years for Monsieur Pelicot. Let's bring in Siobhan. Siobhan, hi.
Hi, yes. So they've gone through all of the men so far. Every verdict I've seen is guilty. They're now going through the sentences. Monsieur Pelicot, Dominique Pelicot, asked to stand. He's condemned to 20 years in prison. This is a man who is already 72 years old. It would mean that he would stay in prison until he's 92 years old. He's already suffering from health complaints. It is very likely that he will die in prison. They are now continuing. Jean-Pierre M., the so-called disciple, found guilty, 12 years in prison for him. Now, they had actually asked for 17 years in prison, but he's been given 12 years, according to my colleagues in court. Charlie A is the next one who will be handed his sentence. Just a reminder that he was 22 when he started, when he met Dominique Pelicot and was accused and found guilty of raping Gisele Pelicot 6 times, including on her birthday. Now, his defence was that he didn't know, that she hadn't given consent, that he was very naive, that he'd been manipulated by Dominique Pelicot, who assured him that this was actually the couple's fantasy and that she was very timid. Now, he has been given to 5 years in prison. 3 years of those have been suspended. So let me just update that. This is for Jacques C, who's been found guilty. He has been given 5 years in prison, 3 years suspended. Charlie A, who I was telling you about just then, the man who's accused of raping Gisele 6 times, still to receive his sentence. Another person, Cyril D, has just been sentenced to 8 years in prison. So the sentences that coming down, the prosecution had asked for sentences between 4 years which was for the person who is accused of aggravated sexual assault, and up to 20 years for Dominique Pelicot. We now know that Dominique Pelicot has been sentenced to that maximum 20 years, which the prosecution requested.
We've spent much of this time, haven't we, shaking our heads at all of these sentences that have come through, and we've seen, Siobhan, the protests that have been sparked because of this case. There will be a lot of soul-searching in the days and the weeks following this. But will there be a question about France perhaps updating their rape law?
Well, I think there has been no inquiry.
There definitely will be a question, because it's a question that's already being asked. You go to those protests, as I have in Paris, and some of the women there are saying we need to change our laws. We have to add consent to the rape law because it isn't in it at the moment. And certainly Gisele Pelicot, by choosing to waive her right to anonymity, has pushed these discussions about rape and drugging to the highest echelons of society, and it is something that is being discussed by ministers. And actually some changes have already been brought in, for example, better test kits for victims of drug and rape attacks. So they are making changes. But I'm going to bring in Agnès Poirier, who is with me now. You're a broadcaster. You can tell us more about this. Do you feel that already changes are happening or being discussed as a result of this trial in terms of how rape victims are treated and knowledge around rape and drugging and rape?
Yes, of course. I mean, this was actually the reason why Gisele Pelicot waived her anonymity, is that she wanted, I mean, there will be before and after Gisele Pelicot in that. I think a lot of trials for rape will now be public, just to expose the rapist to start with, so that, you know, what she said, shame must change sides, actually take place in French society. But you were talking about the law. I mean, it's interesting because we've come a very long way, and it gets revised, you know, very regularly. There was a very important historical trial case, rape case in 1974 near here by another Gisèle Halimi, who is a very well-known feminist lawyer. And at the time, rape was a public indecency misdemeanor in 1974, and she represented 2 Belgian women who had been raped by 3 men while camping, and they waived also their right to anonymity. And, you know, she changed the law. That trial changed the law, and it's the same now that we have this question of consent. A lot of feminists are actually divided on the issue, because should the victim show and prove that she didn't consent, or should it be to the alleged rapist to show that there was express consent? I mean, it's a very important, thing. So there is a lot of discussion, but it's bound to happen. You know.
And we've just got some more sentences just to bring you. So Charlie A, who we were waiting for before, the man who was the youngest defendant, who was found guilty of raping Gisele Pelicot 6 times, including on her birthday. He's been given a 13-year sentence. So far of the sentences that we've got handed down, and this is a working through all of the defendants, so this could change, but we've got Dominique Pelicot with the maximum sentence, 20 years. That's expected that obviously is the highest sentence. And then we've got Charlie A, the next highest sentence so far, 13 years. And then we've got Jean-Pierre M, 12 years. He was the disciple not accused of raping Gisele Pelicot, instead being taught by Dominique Pelicot how to drug and rape his own wife. Has this... We've talked a lot about how this has influenced women and made women really take to the streets to talk about rape. How are men reacting to this case in France?
Well, it's been very interesting to see because I mean, we have the films, we have the videos that Dominique Pelicot did. So it makes it a very, very powerful case because we have evidence, and it's something that very often lack in cases of rape, you know, lack of evidence, lack of material evidence. But this time, this man, this rapist, actually archived, documented his perversity. So, you know, it's for everyone to see. That's why when, you know, the 50 accused men, most of them denied the facts. It was just incredible for people to see. So, you know, it's going to change things radically in France, but not only in France. I think it goes beyond. That's why, I mean, it's a universal case. That's why it's so important, also because of the ordinariness of both the accused. And Gisele Pelicot said, I'm a pensioner, I'm a normal, ordinary woman, and therefore this is what's happened to me is likely to happen to other women, and I want this to stop.
I think that's a really good point that Agnès has just made. This, of course, isn't just sending reverberations across France, but around the world. Really a moment for people to stand back and say, do we need to look at our rape laws? Is enough being done? Is shame still being put on the victim? Something that Gisele Pelicot is very clear to underline. Shame must change sides, and we're hearing now the verdicts and the sentences coming in for the men who have been found guilty of raping or sexually assaulting her.
Thank you, Siobhan. For people just tuning our way, we are receiving the verdicts of the men who have now been convicted of raping Madame Pelicot. She has been brave throughout. She waived her right to anonymity, and the verdicts and the length of time they are spending in jail, it's taking a while. There were 51 of them who abused this woman time after time. Monsieur Pelicot, guilty of aggravated rape against Gisele Pelicot, guilty of illegal broadcast of images of Gisele Pelicot, guilty of recording images of Gisele Pelicot, guilty of recording images of 2 other women. Jean-Pierre M, guilty, 12 years in prison. Jacques C, guilty, 5 years in prison with 3 years suspended. Cyril D, guilty, 8 years in prison. Charlie A, guilty, 13 years in prison. He raped Madame Pelicot 6 times, including on her birthday and on Christmas Day. Let's just let that sink in. Christian L, guilty, 9 years in prison. Nicholas F, guilty, 8 years in prison. Lionel R, guilty, 8 years in prison. All men have been found guilty, waiting for the sentencing on the others. One of them will be in absentia. He is still on the run, thought to be in Morocco. Thoughts on the length of time that they've been sentenced to?
Well, not nearly enough, given the gravity of the crimes that they've committed against Gisele Pelicot. I mean, question whether that really is justice when you're serving either 1 or 2 years in prison for each rape that you've perpetrated, to the extent that it'll have profound lifelong consequences for Gisele. Charlie A, who you mentioned, he was one of the, I think, the youngest or one of the youngest. 22. That had raped Gisele Pelicot. And I was reading about him in particular, and there was a conversation that took place that was recorded between him and Dominique Pelicot, and they were talking about raping Charlie A's mother. And then Dominique, in fact, gave Charlie A sedatives, I think wrapped in some foil, so that he could drug Charlie A's mother, and then they could both, presumably, rape her. Of course, he wasn't convicted of this, but it formed part of the picture that we heard play out in court and indeed in the media. And whilst they deny, I believe, raping the mother, in fact, when they did, I think it was hair strand testing, drug testing on Charlie A's mother, in fact, they did identify that there were sedatives in her system, even though she said herself she had taken no sedatives. So when you start digging in to every single defendant in terms of what their background history is and whether they have potentially drugged and raped other women, I think we start to see what a significant systemic issue this actually is.
Dr. Sharp, this would have been a very different case if we hadn't had all of the video footage, if Gisele Pelicot decided to remain away from the screen, anonymous. And that's quite telling, isn't it, for women who will be going through something similar to come to the forefront and bring that case and to fight it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this really is, I think, you know, it's clearly a groundbreaking case. It's one that's going to go down in history. And whether Gisele Pelicot, I think, likes it or not, she is an icon. One of those reasons, as you say, is because of the great deal of footage that the police discovered on the hard drive of Dominique Pelicot, in contrast to very many other cases where it's a he said, she said. She says that he raped her, and then ultimately often it's seen that the burden is put on her to prove that he did that to her. And I know France is really looking at changing their laws concerning this. But without that footage, it's very difficult sometimes to prove that rape has taken place. We don't have any third-party evidence, don't have any corroborating evidence, often no photographs, no videos. This case is extraordinary because it was all laid out there to bear, and the whole world was able to see it to the extent that it was played out in court, I think, for the first time. Very unusual. Initially, I think, the judge had actually refused that request and then re-looked at that request later on during the trial and allowed it so the video footage could be played out and those, of course, that were in court could see it, and then it was reported in other forms in the mainstream media. I suppose what I'm concerned about is potential other people jumping on the bandwagon, those people that already perhaps have a fantasy of drugging and raping women, because clearly it's quite a prolific one within certain groups of men online, whether they're going to carry out such incidents and look for other ways of being united on the dark web. And it does happen here. You know, I've worked on cases involving women that were raped in their sleep, wives, those that said that they have been drugged by their husbands and raped. I represented Kate Knighton, who was a Member of Parliament, her name then Kate Griffiths, who said that she had been raped at the time. Her husband, Andrew Griffiths, Member of Parliament, in fact a minister, even involved in the upskirting bill himself, which was pioneered by Gina Martin, a feminist activist. Meanwhile, he was raping his wife behind closed doors. I represented her in the family court and she secured those findings. But as you rightly touched on, that was a highly unusual case, just like Gisele Pelicot, in that both of their identities were made public so that we can talk about this now and draw on parallels. But how many other such cases like that are there out there? And I think all too often I've heard women say this to me in court, that, well, we were married. You know, when they're describing to me their husband raping them whilst they were asleep, we were married, as if that becomes normalised or it becomes acceptable. And we need to change those cultural, I think, norms around what is permissible in the bedroom, because quite clearly without affirmative consent, and by that I mean welcome, wanted, mutual, respectful sex, if that's not present, then there's either a grey area or it's very clearly rape, and our legal system needs to wake up to that fact, as indeed do the police.
It's just after 9:30. We should say, just make the point that Andrew Griffith and Andrew Griffiths, both politicians, one of them very different to the other one. In just a second, we will be returning to hear from Siobhan as more convictions and the length of sentence continue to be read out by the judges in court. But the top line for us this morning, Gisele Pelicot's husband, sentenced to the maximum 20 years in prison for her rape and other allegations against him as well. Back to Siobhan in a second, but first, let's bring in David Chazan, a journalist based in Paris. Hello to you, David. What impact has this case had on France?
Well, I think it's had an enormous impact, but feminist campaigners say the media should have given it more prominent coverage. You know, imagine if a case like this had been in Britain, it would have been front page news for weeks and weeks. That hasn't always been the case in France. And, you know, I'm now looking at one of the French news channels, and they're going rolling on it. So they've got continuous live coverage of the verdicts and outside the court as this takes place. But there is a feeling that France has been reluctant to confront what Gisele Pelicot called in her testimony to the court its patriarchal macho society and the way that it's tended to normalize rape and minimize the consequences of rape on the lives of many, many women. And we've seen that France has had a kind of a Me Too moment. There have been a number of showbiz personalities, including the film star Gérard Depardieu, accused of rape. He has not stood trial yet. He denies all the allegations against him. But many people were outraged when President Macron seemed to be defending him during a TV interview in which Macron said he's one of our greatest artists and we have to assume he's innocent until he's convicted, which legally is true, but it didn't play well in the court of public opinion. So what campaigners are hoping is that this is going to be a watershed moment for the way France handles allegations of rape. I mean, this is a country that only introduced a minimum age of consent a few years ago. And there's been a feeling that French men have just tended to dismiss cases like this as relatively unimportant in the past.
I know that you've written, David, about the impact, the effect this trial has had on the rest of the Pelicot family.
Yeah, well, it's completely shattered them, and they're in court this morning. They're listening to the verdicts and the sentences being read out now. And in particular, I mean, Gisele and Dominique Pelicot's two sons, David and Florian, and their daughter Caroline, have all testified to the trial, saying how this has wrecked their lives. It's caused divorce, it's caused them professional problems, and one of their two sons has demanded angrily during the trial that Dominique Pelicot come clean about whether he also abused one of his grandchildren, who was only 3 at the time, and that boy, now 18, is also in court. And perhaps some of the worst impacts that this has had on the family have been to Gisele Pelicot's daughter, Caroline. She is convinced that she suffered similar treatment to her mother, and she has also demanded during the trial that Dominique Pelicot come clean about that. He's denied it, but he has been found guilty of filming both her and his 2 daughters-in-law without their knowledge while they were sleeping.
One of Pelicot's sons, Florian, said that he was going to undergo a DNA test because he didn't know if Dominique Pelicot was his father, and he said it would be unbelievable relief if it was proven that this man was not his father. I don't know even how to ask this. How does someone come to terms with that level of betrayal to the extent that you hope that someone is not your father?
It must be absolutely awful. It's difficult to comprehend, isn't it? And, he said during his testimony, he spoke directly to his father, who was in the dock, and said to him, how am I going to rebuild my life now? How are any of us going to put our lives back together after what you've done to us? Because this was a man they looked up to, and who was viewed even by Gisele Pelicot herself, his ex-wife, as a model husband and father. This is the man she was married to for 50 years. And right up until the police showed her the footage they found on his computer after they arrested him trying to film up the skirts of women at a local supermarket, she still thought that she was in love with him, and she was praising him for taking her to doctor's appointments for problems that she now knows were caused by these repeated rapes by dozens of men whom he recruited at an online forum. So it's really, I think this is something that will stay with this family forever.
Just a final thought. We want to go back to Siobhan in just a second, but just a final thought. These actions cannot have been carried out by somebody who is of sound mind. I'm guessing that will be a part defence when they decide where he is going to spend his next 20 years. But I assume he will go to a normal jail.
Yeah, I think it's clear that he will go to a normal jail. He's already been examined by psychologists appointed by the court. The only mitigation really is his statement that he himself was raped and suffered abuse as a child. That could be seen as some sort of mitigating factor. But Gisele Pelicot addressed that in her testimony and said, while she accepts that that damaged him, she did her best to provide him with a normal family life. And she certainly feels that he made his own decisions about his actions, and he certainly didn't have to do what he did.
David, thank you for your expertise on this topic. Thank you. Siobhan is joining us again as the details continue to come through. Siobhan, I'm just saying 47 men guilty of rape, 2 guilty of attempted rape, 2 guilty of sexual assault.
That's right. As you say, the sentence is coming through. Just to recap where we are, Dominique Pelicot, the former husband of Gisele Pelicot, who admitted drugging and raping her over almost a decade and inviting other men to the house to rape her as well, has been given the longest sentence of 20 years. He's 72 now. It means he will likely die in jail. And actually in court earlier in the proceedings of the trial, his daughter shouted at him, "You will die alone like a dog in jail." He's begged for their forgiveness. That will not come. Other sentences which have been handed down: 12 years to Jean-Pierre M., who is the disciple that was taught by Dominique Pelicot how to drug and rape his own wife. Charlie A., sentenced to 13 years in prison. He was found guilty of raping Gisele Pelicot 6 times, the youngest defendant in the trial, 22 at the time when it started, when he started meeting Dominique. And one of those rapes, we're told, took place on Gisele's birthday. 8 years for Nicholas F., more coming in as well. 10 years for Yuan K. Now, I think what's really important as we go through this, let's just remind people a bit more about the background of this case if they're just tuning in now. What we're hearing today is the verdicts and the sentences in the case of this mass rape trial, which has really gripped France and the world. And this was the case of Dominique Pelicot, who I've explained was married to Gisele Pelicot. They lived in Provence, in a pretty little village called Mazan, but for 10 years he'd been drugging and raping her and inviting strangers to the home to do the same. Now, 50 men, in addition to Dominique Pelicot, were on trial accused of rape and sexual assault. Around 2/3 of them denied the charges, but today all of them have been found guilty in some way or another. So we know the court's has found 47 men guilty of rape, 2 guilty of attempted rape and 2 guilty of sexual assault. And I think the scale of this case is exceptionally harrowing, but so too is the planning that Dominique Pelicot put into abusing the woman he still maintains that he loves. He asked men not to wear fragrances when they came to the house to rape her so that she wouldn't smell any trace of them in the house. He asked them to park around the corner so that the neighbours weren't alerted or she wouldn't hear the car. He asked one man to warm his hands on the radiator. One of the men who has been found guilty today and sentenced actually drove to their holiday home after being invited by Dominique Pelicot and raped Gisele while she'd been sedated while they were on holiday. Another person has been found guilty of raping her on New Year's Eve. It really is utterly harrowing, the extent of these crimes and the fact that he documented them so meticulously. 20,000 indecent images found by the police. He put into files that he'd named called Abuse, one of these files called Abuse, and many of the videos when the police looked at them showing a range of men attacking one woman who lay motionless. That is 72-year-old Gisele Pelicot, a mother of 3, a grandmother of 7, who believed until 2020 that her husband was the perfect man. And then she was pulled into a police station and shown by officers 1 photo, 2 photo, and on the 3rd photo she said, stop, because they showed her evidence that the man she trusted was actually a rapist and she was his main victim.
Joseph C., I see, is guilty of sexual assault, 3 years in prison, but could possibly walk free?
Yes, we'll need to get more on those details from the team in the court, because, as I've explained, we've got a team in the court, team out here. The possibly walk free could be because this trial has been going. People were arrested a few years ago. Some may have already served the sentence while they're waiting for it, so that could be why they could walk free now. But I don't want to jump the gun and explain something that we don't know the facts for. So we'll wait for the team in court for that. But that's the kind of reason why someone might not have more sentence to serve, because they've already served it in the run-up to the trial.
38 sentences now have been handed down by the court. Somebody who won't be there to hear his sentence, although he has been found guilty, is Hassan O.
Yeah, so he is on the run. He is the person who everyone else turned up in court, were picked up by the police, but he actually is being sentenced in absentia because he hasn't been caught. And I think another important thing to remind people of is, yes, there are 50 men in court being sentenced today, but there are a suspected around 30 other men who were in the images on those videos that police found who haven't yet been identified. And to remind people at home that the majority of the people who have been identified and are now on trial, they come from around a 40-mile radius. They are from a range of backgrounds, but they're local. So there's a real suspicion that the 30 others who've been caught on these videos but haven't yet been found or identified could be in the local area as well.
OK. I'm just hearing there that Hassan O has been sentenced to 12 years in his absence. And we are looking from time to time inside the courtroom, because we are expecting Madame Pelicot to make a statement after this business is finished.
Yes, that's right. She has been very courageous throughout and has thanked the lines of people who every day have stood across the road where I am now and applauded as she arrived. And it really is a matter of the crimes being devastating and horrific beyond words. So instead they showed their support by clapping. And she's gone in every day to look these men in the eye, and I think this will be her opportunity, after addressing the court on several occasions actually, and saying, for example, the background about how she was tricked by Dominique, for example, and how he used to bring her favourite food and she thought he was being supportive and kind, but actually he was just doing it to drug her. And at the end saying that this was a trial of cowardice and that really the men should feel extremely guilty for never stopping, for never asking. So I think this will be her moment, not just to thank the public and the support that she's got, but also to give her own verdict, possibly, on the men that she's been looking in the face today in court.
OK, Siobhan, Dr. Charlotte here in the studio. This is a day of reckoning for France and how they deal with rape cases. Your reflections on that?
Yes, I mean, I think that they need to update their laws when it comes to rape legislation. They need a clear definition of consent. And instead of it being put on the victim to prove that she didn't consent to having sex with a man, I think that the onus should, in fact, be put on him. And he should have to show what steps he has taken to ensure that she does consent. Because we saw in this case men saying, well, I didn't know that Gisele Pelicot didn't want to have sex with me because her husband told me that she was consenting. It was all a ruse, it was all a game. You know, she pretended either to be sedated or she consented to being sedated such that this stranger could have sexual intercourse with her and therefore rape her. So I think France needs to update its legislation. I would like to see what we call an affirmative-based model on consent. So yes means yes in this country as well, and it's something that I've been campaigning for with my organisation Right to Equality, which campaigns to change the law for women and girls, and in fact it was spearheaded by Emily Atack, the actor, to introduce yes means yes. So for a woman to consent, you know, she's expected or encouraged, in fact, to give some sort of verbal communication of wanting to have sex, rather than a man assuming because she's there, because she's lying there, she's therefore up for it, you know, that she is consenting by virtue of the fact she hasn't said no. I think we need to move away from that. And of course, we recognise how prevalent rape culture is in all of our societies, so we need a strong law that holds rapists accountable.
Siobhan's still with us. Siobhan, as I was saying to our viewers a few moments ago, we are expecting Madame Pelicot to speak shortly. We saw her arrive a couple of hours or so ago. Now she was surrounded by her adult children who have suffered so much as well at the hands of their father. One of them, Florian, in court saying, how are we supposed to be able to recover from this? He also said during the hearing that he was undergoing a DNA test, and the level of relief, if it was proven that this man was not his father, would be immense. When she arrived at court, she was calm. She was smiling. This lady is 71 years old, and this was her day of justice after being completely destroyed by who she thought was the perfect husband.
That's exactly right. And she's actually, this case has taken so long, she's actually just turned 72. And she has said, despite the dignity in which she has arrived in court day after day and spoken to court and had to face really difficult, probing questions from the defence. At one point, one of the defence lawyers suggested if the men didn't know it was rape, then is it really rape? And she said in reply to him, rape is rape. She said that she's a destroyed woman, that she's getting support and therapy and she goes for long walks, but it might just take the rest of her life to rebuild, and actually she may never recover. But I think she is such a beacon of hope and strength. And actually I'm with the broadcaster, Agnès Poirier. Who is Gisele Pelicot and what does she mean to France now?
Well, she's an extraordinary woman.
OK. So I'm hearing that in just a few... I'm sorry about that, Siobhan. Just hearing that in just a few moments we should see Madame Pelicot. The hearing has now been completed. And as a result, her husband will be spending the next 20 years behind bars. Several other men that also were found guilty of rape could be spent not as much as 20 years, but 12 years, varying amounts of time. And as I said, it looks as though the judges Not one of the judges, do you think?
One of
the court ushers.
Communication if you'd like to take one of these, if anybody's interested. There's not enough for everybody. It's not much.
Il n'y a pas la Normandie ou Brest ou... Tenez, allez, tenez. Merci beaucoup.
Go ahead, take it. Thank you very much. Thanks.
This would be one of the clerks of the court, just explaining.
Usher explaining what sentences have been handed down. I wonder if on the paper the names of the men, albeit the acronyms or the...
they're not using their surnames.
They're not using their
keeping their
surname.
anonymity.
I see. So that, yeah. I have to say, I do find that extraordinary that these men are able to keep their anonymity. I mean, of course, in this country, they wouldn't have anonymity. They'd all be named and identified, and indeed these men, in my view, should be. They've committed some of the most horrendous crimes imaginable, and they should be identified with their names and their photographs. Goodness gracious, especially when you see the victim has waived her right to anonymity and the amount of strength and bravery she has shown. Why should they be cowards hiding behind their first name and a letter for their surname? So I wonder whether that piece of paper is setting out their names as we know them and the sentences that they have been given. I don't know, but I'm curious to see what's in there.
And we will hear from Gisele Pelicot in the next few moments and hear from her, but she will go down as an inspiration for victims who don't want to stand in the shame of what happened to them.
Yes, I mean, I think she will. I mean, I feel quite emotional, actually,
Me too,
thinking
actually.
about what she's going to say when she comes out of those doors. I have a tear in my eye thinking about it because, you know, she stands, I think, on so many other women's shoulders who have suffered rape, you know, decades, even centuries ago, and they themselves have tried to seek justice and in doing so have carved out a legal system which should be able to respond in the way that we see for Gisele Pelicot and ensuring that justice is done. And here she comes, I hope, with her team.
So a few of those that have helped and supported her throughout, including her 3 adult children.
Yes.
That, as you said, I think that is her daughter, isn't it? One that feels that she was also abused by her father, but there've been no proof of that. So he hasn't been charged with that, I don't think.
No, but we know that, and that is indeed a fact that came out in the trial, that there was a folder which was discovered on his hard drive, his computer, identifying photographs of his daughter, images which she says included her in her underwear, I think half naked or with some sort of underwear that she didn't recognise, which she says made her believe that he indeed had potentially drugged, raped or sexually assaulted, abused her, and that she said that he will die alone and that he should tell her what happened. I can't imagine how horrific that must be for Gisele Pelicot's daughter, imagining what her father may or may not have done to her and living with the consequence of not knowing.
And some suggestions about abuse of grandchildren as well.
Yes,
they're not confirmed.
and indeed also the wives of his sons. Apparently, his son. I think there was suggested that there were video cameras put up in concealed locations to record them without their permission, without their consent, of course, without their knowledge. Just really, it's unimaginable what was going on behind closed doors, and no one, of course, knew about any of this. Gisele didn't know, the children didn't know, and it just goes to show that we should never imagine, I think, and we should never, I think, treat people with such degree of scepticism because you haven't seen it, therefore it can't have happened. Even those that are living, as indeed Gisele thought, in a very happy, loving marriage, actually had no idea that her husband was drugging and raping and inviting other men to do so. It's thought, in fact, although over 50 men are on trial, that actually it runs into over 100 men, I think even 200 men, that have been committing sexual acts on her. And I don't know whether other men eventually will be brought to justice, but it just goes to show that this is the tip of the iceberg.
What will be happening now? We've seen her children leave. She'll be having some moments with her barrister. What do you think her barrister would be saying, just explaining to her what's going to happen when she comes outside?
Yes, I suspect he'll be preparing her for what's next, what's to come. Probably talking about what she may or may not say to the press. Of course, any discussions that she has with her legal team, at least in this country, consider them to be legally privileged, so she can't necessarily come out and say, my lawyer said this, that and the other to me, because that's confidential between her and her team. But no doubt she'll want to send out a strong message to the public and to rape survivors that have been watching this in utter admiration for her and no doubt learning more about the process as it's gone on.
And those that violated her in the most disgusting fashion will have been taken down to serve their sentences.
Yes, yes, they will. Certainly those that are still due to serve their sentences. Of course, we don't know how many are actually going to walk free, either because they've already served their time or they may have received a suspended sentence. I don't think we're clear about that yet, and we know at least one of those individuals is, I believe, not even in the country, Hassan.
Yeah.
And so whether he will eventually evade justice, I don't know.
Yeah. So, Dominique Pelicot, 72 years old, has confessed to all the charges against him and admitted he mixed sedatives into the food and drink of his wife. 50 others who stood with him in an adjoining glass dock also found guilty of their charges. We'll hear from Marie Pelicot in just a moment. It's 10 o'clock.
OK, thanks so much for that. It is 10 a.m. You're watching Sky News today. We're going to continue with this rolling coverage of the breaking news that in the past hour, a French court has sentenced the ex-husband of Gisele Pelicot to the maximum term of 20 years in prison. Dominique Pelicot drugged and raped his then-wife and, over the course of around a decade, recruited dozens of other men to rape her in her own bed while she was unconscious. The court also found 46 of the accused men guilty of rape, 2 of attempted rape and 2 of attempted assault. Let me bring in now our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins, who's in Avignon for us this morning. Siobhan, just sum up the headlines as they've unfolded for us thus far this morning.
Well, let me first of all remind people at home the details of what is one of the most horrific cases I've certainly ever witnessed and what has absolutely shocked France and many around the world. This is the case of Dominique Pelicot, a 72-year-old now, who has admitted drugging and raping his wife for almost a decade and inviting other men to rape her as well. Now, 50 other men were on trial accused of sex assault and rape. All of the men on trial so far have been found guilty of one